Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-18, Only Way Out. In Wind Mist territory, Mo Na-Yi led the many well-prepared pseudo-royal lords while the black ink giant spirit god made its move. Despite Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing's efforts, they were outnumbered and overwhelmed. Though they were not yet in dire straits, they could no longer restrain the black ink giant spirit god in such a situation. Once the black ink giant spirit god broke free, the two Ninth Order masters who had held out for thousands of years would have their efforts undone, and the other human race masters would have no chance against such a being. The black ink giant spirit god played a vital role in the Black Ink clan's invasion of the 3,000 worlds previously. Had it not been awakened from the divine spirit ancestral land and charged into the barren territory, forcibly opening a passage connecting to the Wind Mist territory, the human race armies would have had the ability to hold off the Black Ink clan in the barren territory. However, the breach nullified all of the humans' efforts, leading to a grand final battle, where many Ninth Order masters sacrificed themselves to preserve hope for the future. This was followed by the mass migration of people in the 3,000 worlds. It could be said that the existence of the Black Ink giant spirit god established the current state of affairs, with the Black Ink clan occupying the 3,000 worlds and human race defending only a dozen or so great territory battlefields. If the Black Ink giant spirit god were to break free now, it would bring disastrous consequences to the human race. Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing had been stationed in Wind Mist territory precisely to prevent such a thing from happening. Previously, the Black Ink clan did not come to bother them because they could not do so, as there weren't a lot of top masters on the Black Ink clan side either. In addition, under the premise that the only royal lord was unable to come forward, innate territory lords were unable to cause any commotion against two veteran Ninth Order masters. Besides, the Black Ink giant spirit god was heavily injured in that great battle thousands of years ago, and needed time to restore itself. Now that the Black Ink clan had masters emerging one after another, and the Black Ink giant spirit god's injuries had been mostly restored, the time had finally come. World force surged and Black Ink's strength roiled as they clashed, causing the void to shatter. Along with that, some chains that bound the gigantic arm had also broken. The huge yin-yang fish rotated continuously, and Dao strength permeated. While struggling to withstand the joint attack of the many pseudo-royal lords, the two Ninth Order masters attempted to continue restraining the Black Ink giant spirit god. However, their strength was limited. How could they hold on in such a situation? Wu Qing roared and Xiao Xiao yelled. The two had an overwhelming presence, and they would never compromise even when facing adversity. Just like the many human old ancestors who had sacrificed themselves for the greater good in the barren territory years ago. Mo Na-Yi only laughed. The situation is as such. Why bother struggling? I have always admired the strength of the human race, but my arrival today is just to give you both a dignified death. Meanwhile, in the barren territory, the Black Ink giant spirit god roared in anger. You think you can restrain this supreme one? Break. As the roar echoed, the arm of the Black Ink giant spirit god suddenly expanded, unleashing a violent surge of power. The chains that had been struggling to hold on could no longer bear the immense pressure, and shattered into twinkling fragments of light, scattering in all directions. With the secret technique broken, Wu Qing and Xiao Xiao both grunted, clearly suffering from some backlash. On the other hand, Mo Na-Yi stood outside the battle ring, enjoying the despair in the eyes of these two Ninth Order masters. For years, the Black Ink clan had not gained many advantages in their battles against the human race, but after this victory, those humans who continued to resist would finally understand who the true masters of the universe were. Hung Long Long. With a resounding boom, the Black Ink giant spirit god finally broke free after being restrained for thousands of years. To the human race, this was surely a great calamity. The despair in the eyes of Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing grew even more intense as Mo Na-Yi coldly said, "Don't even think about escaping. This space has already been sealed off, and with your strength alone, you won't be able to get away." He had even brought the grand array that could be used to deal with Yang Kai. Fearing that these two Ninth Order masters would try to escape, it was difficult to find an opportunity to ambush two Ninth Order masters at once. And if they managed to escape, it would be a huge problem for the Black Ink clan. After Mo Na-Yi finished speaking, Wu Qing charged at him with his halberd, intending to execute the leader of the enemies to intimidate his troops. However, as soon as he moved, he was stopped by a Three Fortunes formations, and became trapped in a bitter battle, unable to escape. Seeing this, Emonayi smirked in mockery. The trap has already been sprung. Now it is up to you both to decide what to do next. He thought to himself, hoping that they wouldn't disappoint him. At that moment, Xiao Xiao suddenly shouted, "Let's go!" The Yin-Yang fish suddenly became turbulent, and many pseudo-royal lords were violently pushed back by the overwhelming force. Xiao Xiao then charged straight up, followed closely behind by Wu Qing with his halberd. The direction they were heading was the same as the spot where the black ink giant spirit god had retreated, a crack leading to the barren territory. Huh. Emonayi couldn't help but snort, his expression showing no surprise as if he had expected this all along. In fact, he had already anticipated how the two Ninth Order Masters would respond to the situation. This strength of void was completely sealed off, and with so many pseudo-royal lords surrounding them and Emonayi himself presiding over the situation, the two Ninth Order Masters simply did not have the strength to fight back. Continuing to engage in battle would only result in their inevitable defeat and demise. However, Emonayi was not willing to take on too much risk or suffer heavy losses. He was confident that he could kill the two Ninth Order Masters here, but he didn't know how much it would cost him. If the two of them abandoned all hope of survival and fought to achieve mutual destruction, the pseudo-royal lords would surely suffer heavy casualties. Even he might not escape intact. With such concerns in mind, he couldn't force them too hard or else it would be too risky. As someone who had been in charge of the Black Ink clan's military affairs for so many years, Emonayi knew that sometimes giving the enemy hope was the best way to corner them and reduce one's own losses. Although the Black Ink giant spirit god had been freed, and the arm that had been chained for thousands of years had been retrieved, the opening in the boundary wall connecting the barren territory and wind mist territory had long stabilized and did not disappear. In this dire situation, the two Ninth Order Masters only had one way out, to charge into the barren territory. Everything is going according to plan. In the barren territory, the Black Ink giant spirit god had been fully freed. If the two human masters rashly charged in, there would surely be no good outcome. By that time, Emonayi would lead his pseudo-royal lords to pincer them with the assistance of the Black Ink giant spirit god. A way simpler way to take them down rather than fighting to their death here in the wind mist territory. The two Ninth Order Masters knew what they were about to face, but under the current circumstances, they did not have another choice. Staying here meant certain death, as they would be worn down and killed sooner or later. So charging into the barren territory was their only chance to snatch life from the gates of death. The arm of the Black Ink giant spirit god had already been retrieved, and Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing had also charged into the passage and disappeared. The many pseudo-royal lords followed closely behind, ready to charge in, but were suddenly stopped by Emonayi. Wait! The pseudo-royal lords immediately paused their movements. Emonayi remained calm, silently waiting and feeling the intense fluctuations of battle coming from the other end of the passage that was occasionally mixed with the muffled groans of Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing. It was clear that they had suffered losses at the Black Ink giant spirit god's hands. Emonayi sneered in his heart. So what if you're a Ninth Order Master? You're nothing in the face of our Black Ink giant spirit god. Previously, when the Black Ink giant spirit god appeared on the battlefield, the human race had needed to mobilize at least 10 Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters to simply contain it. But currently, with only the two of them, how could Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing be opponents of the Black Ink giant spirit god? Charge! Emonayi commanded his subordinates soon after. The reason the pseudo-royal lords and the others had to wait was to prevent the two Ninth Order Masters from ambushing them on the other side of the passage. If they did, it would be a surprise attack that could deal them serious damage. Now that they had confirmed that the two had fully charged into the barren territory, they didn't need to wait any longer. Besides, Emonayi was also worried that if they followed too late, the two humans might have a chance to escape. Although the barren territory had some defenses in place, there were not enough masters to provide comprehensive coverage. Furthermore, though the Black Ink giant spirit god was powerful, it might not be able to stop the two Ninth Order Masters if they were determined to escape. The pseudo-royal lords rushed into the passageway, with Mo Nayi following behind. Soon after, the many black ink clansmen entered the barren territory. Looking up, Mo Nayi saw the imposing black ink giant spirit god standing in place, as its two massive hands reached out to grab at the two Ninth Order masters who were frantically flying around, trying to avoid its grasp. Although the black ink giant spirit god occasionally threw a punch that didn't land, the shockwaves alone were enough to shatter the void and send the Ninth Order masters tumbling. Watching this scene quietly, Mo Nayi ordered, "Set up the array and kill them both." The two Ninth Order masters were at a dead end. With the black ink giant spirit god here, along with a royal lord and many pseudo-royal lords working together, there was no way they could survive. It was time to reap the rewards of their victory. Suddenly, Mo Nayi felt a bit disheartened. If the one we were targeting was Yang Kai, what would he do to break out of this situation? He couldn't think of any effective methods to break through such a defense, except to avoid entering the barren territory altogether, and to simply fight in the wind-mist territory until one side gave in. But that would likely result in losses for his side. It was a shame that the killing star was now certainly trapped in the universe furnace. He might have already perished inside, or he might have to wait until the next time the universe furnace opened to escape. However, who knew how many years it would take for the next opening? By then, the entire universe would belong to the Black Ink clan. As Mo Nayi was lost in thought, his expression suddenly changed as he looked toward Xiao Xiao, who was flying about frantically. Xiao Xiao had suddenly looked towards him too, and when they locked eyes, Xiao Xiao shouted, "Mo Nayi, Yang Kai left something for the Black Ink clan as a gift, please accept it." With that, she tossed a round bead towards him. There was no fluctuation of power, and it didn't seem to be an artifact. In fact, it looked like a simple pebble that could be found anywhere in any universe world. But when Xiao Xiao threw out that bead, Mo Nayi felt a sense of imminent crisis, and a chill shot up his spine from the tips of his toes to the top of his head. Martial Peak. Chapter 58-19 Hidden Hand. The assault of the Black Ink Giant Spirit God was simple yet violent, making it difficult for even two Ninth Order masters to contend with. It was as the saying went, "One great force surpasses 10 masters." Amidst the chaos, Xiao Xiao threw an object towards the pseudo-royal lords and royal lord. In that instant, Mo Nayi felt a sense of danger as he heard the name, Yang Kai, ringing in his ears. Over the years he had engaged in many battles with Yang Kai, but never gained an advantage. In fact, even when he had the upper hand in their last two encounters, and was on the verge of killing him, Yang Kai always managed to turn the tables on him. In the previous encounter, the Black Ink clan lost many innate territory lords to Yang Kai, and in their last battle, a true royal lord and several pseudo-royal lords had fallen at his hands. It could be said that Yang Kai had long since become Mo Nayi's heart demon. When Mo Nayi learned that Yang Kai was trapped in the universe furnace and had no chance of escaping, he felt pity but also joy as he would no longer have to face that killing star. However, he never expected to face a hidden hand left behind by Yang Kai at this critical moment. He didn't know what the bead thrown by Xiao Xiao was, but anything related to Yang Kai couldn't be taken lightly. The little round bead thrown by Xiao Xiao came at an extremely high speed, almost hitting them before Xiao Xiao finished speaking, but was immediately punched furiously by a pseudo-royal lord. "Don't!" Mo Nayi roared, but it was too late. Under the violent impact, the bead momentarily froze before quickly breaking through the force impacting it, and came flying towards them again. The pseudo-royal lord who had attacked felt something unusual about the bead the moment his black ink strength made contact. Though others might not have been able to perceive its mystery, he could feel that Xiao Xiao's bead was unexpectedly heavy, and when combined with the mysterious power from a Ninth Order master, he was unable to block it with his punch. The next instant, the round bead closed in, and although the pseudo-royal lord heard Mo Nayi, he was too focused on the sense of danger that suddenly and inexplicably overwhelmed him. He did not care anymore, so he punched out again with all his strength. With a loud bang, the void shook and the pseudo-royal lord grunted as he was sent flying. At the same time, the bead finally shattered. It was not some sturdy artifact, so it couldn't withstand the full force of a pseudo-royal lord's attack. At the moment when the bead shattered, space principles surged wildly. From the remnants of the shattered bead, Large universe fragments appeared and shot in all directions, causing chaos among the Black Ink clan. An entire universe world. Emonayi exclaimed in a low voice, his eyes full of shock. Only now did he realize that the bead was not some simple stone, but rather a universe world refined into an unremarkable appearance through some profound means. Combined with Xiao Zhao's words earlier, Emonayi immediately thought of Yang Kai. In this world, who else could achieve such a fantastic feat but Yang Kai? Moreover, many years ago, he had heard rumors that a human had refined and saved many universe worlds before the Black Ink clan's army arrived. Many of the universe worlds, which had been lingering in the void for countless years, had disappeared abruptly. Some Black Ink disciples also revealed related information that Yang Kai had the means to refine universe worlds into tiny beads, apparently called sealed world beads or world beads. Putting all the pieces of information together, Emonayi immediately understood that this was a world bead that Yang Kai had refined. Although the pseudo-royal lord was powerful and could easily shatter a world bead with his strength, he had suffered some injuries, mainly because he had not expected such a small thing to have such tremendous weight behind it. But what could a trivial world bead do to the Black Ink clan? Was this the gift that Yang Kai had left? If so, that was too disappointing. Emonayi remained tense because he knew that things could not be that simple. While resisting the impact of those shattered universe fragments, he calmly observed his surroundings. The next moment, Emonayi caught a glimpse of something horrifying, causing his expression to change dramatically. In his field of vision, a huge universe fragment that covered the sky suddenly exuded an extremely terrifying aura. As the aura emerged, a figure slowly rose up in the void. The figure was majestic and towering, with a bald head that shone like the sun. Despite its ferocious appearance, there was a strange simplicity in its expression. It seemed to have just woken up from a deep sleep, and its bleary eyes were still mixed with a hint of confusion and sleepiness. It also had a somewhat displeased expression, just like anyone who was forcibly awakened from their sleep would feel. Emonayi's soul trembled as he exclaimed, "A giant spirit god! How could there be a giant spirit god? How could there be a giant spirit god inside?" He immediately realized that a giant spirit god had been sealed within Xiao Zhao's world bead. And he finally understood that the world bead was not the gift from Yang Kai to the Black Ink clan, but rather this giant spirit god was. Although the giant spirit god seemed to have just awakened from a deep sleep, no one dared to underestimate its power. The Black Ink giant spirit gods were created based on this unique race. Emo had to split parts of his soul to create them. Thus, each Black Ink giant spirit god could be seen as a soul clone of Mo. In the whole universe, there was no race more powerful than the giant spirit god clan, and only supreme masters like Mo could surpass them. The Black Ink clan had always considered the restrained Black Ink giant spirit god their strongest hidden hand. They had ignored it for many years, not because they had forgotten about it, but because they were waiting for the right opportunity to release it. Now that the opportunity had come, Emonayi led many pseudo-royal lords to besiege the two Ninth Order masters in Wind Mist territory, taking the chance to help the Black Ink giant spirit god break free. After they succeeded, the Black Ink clan would have the power and strength to eradicate the human race. This Black Ink giant spirit god was their greatest trump card, and the human race would ultimately find it impossible to contend with. But never had they imagined that Yang Kai had a way to deal with the Black Ink clan's long-preserved hidden hand. Worse, he clearly discovered this card long ago. Emonayi did not know when Yang Kai had given the world bead to Xiao Xiao, but it was definitely not recently. Perhaps 1,000 years ago, or maybe 2,000 years ago, or even earlier. Did Yang Kai predict this day even back then? Emonayi quickly dismissed this idea. Although Yang Kai was powerful and agile, it was impossible for him to know everything beforehand. He must have given the world bead containing the sealed giant spirit god to Xiao Xiao just to guard against the day the Black Ink giant spirit god would escape. He knew the Black Ink giant spirit god would surely break free one day. And in this universe, only a true giant spirit god could stand against it. Though there was clearly some forethought put into this, the events of today were more coincidence than careful planning. Realizing this, Emonayi was filled with bitterness. He thought that Yang Kai was trapped in the universe furnace, and he would never have to deal with this powerful enemy again. But who would have thought that he had still fallen into Yang Kai's trap, even though Yang Kai was not even here anymore? This killing star was indeed his lifelong enemy. With his thoughts in chaos, Mo Na Yi heard Xiao Zhao's explosive shout. Ada, kill the enemy! She had learned the name of the giant spirit god from Yang Kai himself. In the world today, there were only two known giant spirit gods left, Ada and Aer. Their names were simple, and they were easy to tell apart. Ada was bald, while Aer had a tuft of baby hair on his head. Back when the Black Ink clan army breached the no-return pass, the human race was promptly assisted by Aer, who was wandering around the 3,000 worlds. Somehow, Aer seemed to know what was happening and stormed into the barren territory to face off against the Black Ink giant spirit god. After the human army suffered a crushing defeat, they withdrew, but Aer stayed behind. For thousands of years, he had been locked in battle with another Black Ink giant spirit god. A battle so intense that it literally shattered space wherever they went. Today, the barren territory was home to the giant spirit god, and the Black Ink giant spirit god. In truth, the human race wanted to locate Ada earlier, but unfortunately, they had never been able to determine his whereabouts, and the matter was eventually left unresolved. It wasn't until Yang Kai went out searching for traces of the first primordial light that he found Ada, sleeping in one of the dead universe worlds. Ada must have been eating well as he was sleeping so soundly that he was totally unaware of what was going on in the outside world. That time, Yang Kai had traversed almost the entire 3,000 worlds, personally investigating each universe world. However, instead of immediately awakening Ada after finding him, he first refined the entire universe world to leave as a hidden hand. Then, when he went to visit Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing, he quietly handed the world bead over to Xiao Xiao to keep until the day they needed Ada's power to counter the Black Ink giant spirit god. As Mo Na Yi predicted, Yang Kai knew that the day would come when the Black Ink giant spirit god would break free, and the Black Ink clan undoubtedly used it as a trump card. When that day came, Xiao Xiao could summon the world bead and awaken Ada. No matter what the Black Ink clan was planning, Ada's appearance would surely catch them off guard. It was just that Yang Kai would never expect that the sleepy Ada would react slowly even after being forcibly awakened. Though to be fair, this guy had always been a simpleton. It was only after Xiao Xiao shouted that Ada gradually focused his sleepy eyes, rubbed his bald head, turned his neck slowly, and looked around. Upon seeing the black figures around him, his already unpleasant mood became much worse. Black Ink clan! Ada exclaimed, his voice like thunder, shaking the void all around him. With an irritated look he shouted, "Little friend told Ada to kill all from the Black Ink clan." The little friend he was referring to was undoubtedly Yang Kai. While he was sleeping in the world bead, he repeatedly heard Yang Kai's voice echoing in his ears, telling him to kill all from the Black Ink clan after he woke up. Despite being annoyed, Ada remembered those words. After waking up from his thousands of years of sleep, Ada finally saw them, and began slowly striding towards the largest cluster of Black Ink clansmen. Little friend said to kill, so I should kill. Even if Yang Kai had not encouraged Ada, there was already an irreconcilable enmity between the giant spirit god clan and the Black Ink clan, so Ada would have killed them regardless. Martial Peak. Chapter 58-20. Nothing related to Yang Kai is ever good. The giant spirit god clan had very few clansmen, but each one was incredibly powerful. They were practically the strongest beings in the universe, with even the divine spirits like the dragons and phoenixes not being their match. Fortunately, the giant spirit god clan had a gentle, almost childlike nature, and never actively sought out trouble. Otherwise, if they were as destructive as the Black Ink clan, the 3,000 worlds would have been destroyed by them long ago. This race fed on dead universe worlds, and had the unique ability to sense the location of dying universe worlds from afar. Yang Kai and Ada first met during the Star Boundaries crisis. During the great battle with great demon god Mo Sheng, the star boundary was brought to the brink of collapse. Ada arrived and slept outside the star boundary, waiting for an opportunity to eat it. It was from Ada that Yang Kai learned how to save the star boundary. Later, Yang Kai broke free from the shackles of the star boundary, and went to the Grand Ancient Ruins boundary in the 3,000 worlds to obtain a root of the world tree, which he then planted in the star boundary to bring it back to life. Ada then disappeared without a trace, but it was thanks to his guidance that the star boundary was saved. Without Ada telling him to search for the world tree, Yang Kai would not have been able to save the dying star boundary. Years later, Yang Kai discovered traces of a giant spirit god in the void, thinking it was Ada, but it turned out to be another giant spirit god named Aer. Under Aer's guidance, he entered the chaotic dead territory and met Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan. Because giant spirit gods fed on dead universe worlds, they had an irreconcilable enmity with the Black Ink clan since ancient times. If the dead universe worlds were like pieces of meat for the giant spirit gods, then the universe worlds corrupted by Black Ink's strength were like disgusting rotten flesh. The giant spirit gods would never feed on such filth. The existence of the Black Ink clan was naturally in opposition to the giant spirit gods. It was because of this that Aer rushed over to assist the humans in the barren territory to fight against the Black Ink giant spirit god. Otherwise, with the giant spirit god's gentle character, how would they easily start a fight with another creature? In the late ancient era, during the Great War between the Black Ink clan and the human race, the giant spirit gods were also active. Both Ada and Aer had even participated in the war against the Black Ink clan back then. At that time, there were more than these two giant spirit gods, but after the endless fighting that lasted for countless years, the already small number of giant spirit god clan members was reduced to 2. Many years later, Ada woke up from his slumber and saw the only race that the giant spirit god deeply hated, which caused his terrifying aura to sweep across half the barren territory. He took big steps forward, and although his movements were clumsy, he was extremely fast. He reached out his gigantic hand and grabbed at the gathering place of the pseudo-royal lords. The hand was so big that it seemed to cover the entire sky, and the pseudo-royal lords were all shocked as they quickly tried to flee in all directions. However, there was an extremely mysterious force surging in the area covered by the giant hand that stirred the void, leaving many pseudo-royal lords staggering despite Ada missing the target. Without giving them a moment to catch their breath, another gigantic hand slapped down. The next moment, a miserable cry resounded as a pseudo-royal lord who could not dodge in time was instantly smashed into paste, exploding into a blood mist from which thick Black Ink strength dissipated. The survivors were terrified at the sight as even a true royal lord like Mo Nayi had to flee desperately under the wild attacks of the giant spirit god. Such power was simply impossible for any royal lord to resist, and he finally understood the pressure that the two Ninth Order masters faced when confronting the Black Ink giant spirit god. Ada shouted as he slapped his hands down one after another, causing chaos throughout the entire barren territory. Many pseudo-royal lords were unable to avoid being hit either directly or by the shockwaves of these attacks. As strong as the pseudo-royal lords were, they could not withstand the might of a giant spirit god. Within moments, 3 pseudo-royal lords died, and several more were injured to the extent that they were coughing up blood non-stop. Mo Nayi was also grazed by the giant palm, and his vitality fluctuated wildly as his heart filled with fear. Even in this situation though, he continued to give orders, commanding the rest to form battle formations and kill the enemy. However, even after the pseudo-royal lords formed battle formations, they were no match for the giant spirit god. Often, before they had a chance to fight back, the battle formation was broken, and they were left dazed from the crude yet overwhelming power used against them. Mo Nayi felt a chill all over his body as he commanded the battle as he cursed Yang Kai in his heart. How malicious can he be to have this hidden hand and not show it after all this time? Over the years, nothing related to Yang Kai was ever a good thing. Mo Nayi couldn't help but think back to the great battle between the Ninth Order Masters and the Black Ink giant spirit god. The Ninth Order Masters were not necessarily stronger than the Black Ink giant spirit god, but with the cooperation of a dozen of them, they were still somewhat able to hold it back. Just how much courage and determination did that take? At this moment, if there were more royal lords cooperating with him, Mo Nayi would have had the confidence to contain this giant spirit god, but there were only 2. Besides, Mou was currently stationed at the No Return Pass, unable to come to the rescue. So what could Mo Nayi accomplish alone? Although there were enough pseudo-royal lords, They were ultimately not true royal lords, so Mo Na Yi did not expect much from them. Originally, victory seemed certain for the Black Ink clan after forcing Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing into the barren territory. However, they had turned the tables by using their previously displayed despair to trick their opponents into letting their guard down. The situation became awkward as the Black Ink giant spirit god struggled to quickly kill the two Ninth Order masters, while pseudo-royal lords were being decimated. If this continued, their situation would only become worse and there would be more casualties. Mo Na Yi had no choice but to shout loudly, "Supreme One!" He could only beg the Black Ink giant spirit god for assistance. However, the Black Ink giant spirit god ignored him even after hearing this cry, treating the two Ninth Order masters like annoying insects buzzing around him. It frustrated the Black Ink giant spirit god who sought to crush them. In truth, Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing were in a precarious state. Though the pseudo-royal lords were struggling to withstand the aftermath of the giant spirit god's attacks, Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing also couldn't hold out for long despite being stronger. However, the two of them had no intention of fleeing. They gritted their teeth and continued to fight back against the Black Ink giant spirit god, provoking its anger and preventing it from helping the pseudo-royal lords. After a while, another pseudo-royal lord's aura was extinguished. He had failed to avoid a fierce attack from Ada, and was instantly obliterated. As a result, four pseudo-royal lords from the Black Ink clan had fallen, while all the others were now heavily injured. Both the giant spirit god and the Black Ink giant spirit god were enormous and seemingly clumsy in their movements, but every single blow they unleashed contained tremendous power that could destroy the heavens and earth. It was impossible to completely avoid such attacks. Perhaps after killing some enemies, Ada's sleep-addled head became clearer. At a certain moment, after sweeping his palm around, he stopped in his tracks and stared in one direction. "Big guy." He finally saw the Black Ink giant spirit god. Enraged, his eyes immediately erupted with boundless fury towards that entity that looked almost identical in appearance and size, but was completely different in nature. He seemed to have a great deal of hatred towards this being. In an instant, he abandoned the numerous pseudo-royal lords and Mo Na Yi, instead taking large strides towards the Black Ink giant spirit god. The many pseudo-royal lords, who had been teetering on the edge of life and death, breathed a collective sigh of relief. In that direction, the Black Ink giant spirit god naturally sensed the approaching foe, and with a broad wave of his arm sent Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing flying before quickly turning around and striding towards Ada. The two colossal creatures charged each other, their identical size and aura making them seem like a mirror reflection in the void, except that one of them was surrounded by Black Ink strength. This was a battle between the most powerful beings in the universe, one in which no one could interfere. On the other side, many pseudo-royal lords wore expressions of relief, glad to have survived that encounter. Fortunately, the giant spirit god discovered the Black Ink clan giant spirit god's presence. Otherwise, none of them knew how many more of them would have died. Mo Na Yi felt extremely bitter. In the end, it wasn't their own strongest master who saved them, but the enemy who drew the Supreme One's attention. In the blink of an eye, the two colossal creatures closed in on each other, seeming to have a telepathic connection as they both threw punches at the same time. When their fists collided, space shattered. The silent collision created visible shockwaves that spread out in all directions from the point of impact. The fallout was so intense and far-reaching that they swept up the injured pseudo-royal lords, causing them to tumble and flip over. Even Mo Na Yi had a hard time standing his ground. This was not the first time this level of battle was fought in the barren territory. Back then, Aer and another Black Ink giant spirit god fought for nearly 1,000 years, with each clash being incredibly terrifying, causing chaos all around them. It wasn't until they grappled each other's limbs, making it impossible for either to move easily, that the 1,000-year-long battle reached a stalemate. Even now, these two giant spirit gods were entangled with each other somewhere in the barren territory's void, and no one knew how long this fight would last. After another violent collision, Mo Na Yi felt like he could barely stand still as he was too close to the battlefield of these two supreme masters, so the aftermath he suffered was naturally more intense. Suddenly thinking of something, he became alert and muttered, "Where are Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing?" Before this, Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing were entangled with the Black Ink giant spirit god, But now that the giant spirit god had his eyes on the black ink giant spirit god, Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing were nowhere to be found. Watch out for sneak attacks, Mo Na Yi hastily shouted, but just as he finished his sentence, a desperate scream came from nearby. He turned his head to see a fleeting figure. It was a pseudo-royal lord falling into a rapidly rotating yin-yang fish, unable to escape as the yin-yang power ground him up. Martial Peak. Chapter 58-21 Complete Defeat. In just a short moment, the pseudo-royal lord trapped in the yin-yang fish lost all vitality and died on the spot. As the attention of the Black Ink clan's many masters was drawn over, Wu Qing's figure appeared like a ghost on the other side of the battlefield. With world force surging, he aimed his halberd at a chosen target. The pseudo-royal lord he selected had an unstable aura and was clearly injured. Having barely escaped from the attack of the giant spirit god, this pseudo-royal lord didn't even sense this silent ambush. It wasn't until the danger was upon him that he noticed, but it was already too late. Unable to mount a proper defense, he presented an opportunity that Wu Qing seized, and with a single strike, the halberd split him in half. Black blood gushed out and Black Ink's strength dissipated. The two Ninth-Order masters who just escaped were like tigers in a flock of sheep, seeking out targets to slaughter. The powers of yin and yang surged, and the long halberd swept out endless sharp edges. Mo Na Yi was furious as he had brought a considerable number of pseudo-royal lords, but he had already lost 6, with 4 killed by the giant spirit god earlier, while 2 more were brought down by Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing in such a short time. These pseudo-royal lords were the backbone of the Black Ink clan's forces against the humans, and though they had not suffered significant losses on the real battlefield, significant casualties had been taken here, causing Mo Na Yi great distress. This operation was supposed to be foolproof. If they had succeeded, not only would they have killed 2 Ninth-Order masters, but they would also have assisted the Black Ink giant spirit god in breaking free from its bindings, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Unfortunately, this seemingly perfect plan had been blown apart after Yang Kai's hidden hand was revealed. Mo Na Yi roared in anger and charged towards Wu Qing. After the initial panic, the pseudo-royal lords hastily formed battle formations against the 2 Ninth-Order masters, and barely managed to hold their ground. Upon noticing Mo Na Yi's movements, Wu Qing immediately flew towards Xiao Xiao's position, ignoring Mo Na Yi's attack from behind. With a fierce blow, he pierced through another pseudo-royal lord who was suppressed by Xiao Xiao. Xiao Xiao understood Wu Qing's intention and fully cooperated. Grand Dao strength surged, suppressing the pseudo-royal lord and rendering him immobile. With 2 Ninth-Order masters joining forces, the lone pseudo-royal lord was no match at all. In a state of extreme shock, he could only watch as Wu Qing pierced him with a single strike. At the same time, Wu Qing's figure shook as he spurted fresh blood. It was a result of Mo Na Yi's attack. The pseudo-royal lords, who had just regained their footing, gathered together in their battle formations from all directions while Mo Na Yi also charged over with haste. On the other hand, Xiao Xiao grabbed Wu Qing's shoulder as the yin-yang fish rolled back, wrapping around them while they withstood the relentless attacks of their enemies as they carved a bloody path out. Powerful secret techniques bombarded them, but they were all dissolved by the yin-yang fish. The shield Xiao Xiao was manipulating trembled, costing her a great deal of energy to maintain. After a moment, the chaotic battle suddenly calmed down as the 2 sides stood across from each other in the void, facing off from afar. In the eerie and quiet stalemate, only the fierce residual waves of the 2 giant spirit gods battling each other in the distance could be felt. Xiao Xiao's chest heaved, and Wu Qing's face was pale with a hint of fresh blood at the corner of his mouth. On the opposite side, Mo Na Yi and the pseudo-royal lords looked at them coldly with eyes full of resentment and anger. However, even with all the rage they felt, it was useless in this situation. Their plan had completely failed. Although the Black Ink giant spirit god had managed to escape, the humans gained another giant spirit god to assist them. These 2 were now mutually restraining each other, making the Black Ink clan's plan to use the Black Ink giant spirit god to sweep away the human race completely useless. In addition, the 2 Ninth-Order masters were also not dead and could escape at any time because their location was right at the entrance to the Wind Mist Territory passage. In the end, the Black Ink giant spirit god was still contained, while the two Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters were now free. Mo Nayi clenched his fists tightly as his heart bled. Originally, in terms of royal lords and Ninth Order Masters, the Black Ink clan was inferior to the human race. The Black Ink clan only had 2 royal lords left, while the humans had 4 available in the 3,000 worlds. The advantage that the Black Ink clan could occupy was mainly due to the many pseudo-royal lords on their side. Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing had been trapped in Wind Mist territory for so many years, so though they could restrain the Black Ink giant spirit god, they were of no use on the battlefield. But now they were freed. On the main battlefield, there would be 2 more human armies led by veteran Ninth Order Masters. This was a disaster for the Black Ink clan. And the reason for this outcome was a hidden hand left behind by Yang Kai millennia ago. Mo Nayi could not understand why Yang Kai had kept such a hidden hand until now instead of using it earlier. Regardless, the Black Ink clan had lost this battle. They thought that Yang Kai, who was trapped in the universe furnace, would no longer cause them any trouble, and that they could completely rid themselves of this heart demon. But who would have thought that they were still shrouded in his shadow? Mo Nayi. Before reaching the entrance to the passage, Xiao Xiao smiled coldly and said, "When I see you on the battlefield, I'll be sure to take your head." Standing beside her, Wu Qing gestured threateningly with a fierce look on his face. Then the two turned around simultaneously and leapt towards the passage that was connected to Wind Mist territory, disappearing in an instant. Mo Nayi simply watched without trying to stop them. In fact, he couldn't stop them. The two had already planned their escape. Even if Mo Nayi had set up an ambush on the other side of the passage in advance, that might not be enough to contain them. In the previous situation, he believed that victory was already assured, and thus there was no need to waste troops by setting up ambushes. But after Xiao Xiao summoned the world bead that sealed the giant spirit god, chaos ensued. Under the frenzied attack of the giant spirit god, he had no choice but to react in the moment. Now, pursuing the enemy was meaningless as they could potentially be ambushed by them. It was a complete and utter defeat, with heavy casualties. 7 pseudo-royal lords died while all the others were injured. Mo Nayi didn't know how to explain this to Mou when he returned. Throughout the years, Mou had trusted him a lot. Otherwise, he would not have granted him so much control. But looking back on the various plans he had presided over through the years, it seemed that none had progressed as he had envisioned. In a previous action against Yang Kai before the appearance of the universe furnace, many innate territory lords died. But, due to the sudden appearance of the universe furnace, Mo Nayi had ultimately failed, and allowed Yang Kai to escape. During the battle between the human race and Black Ink clan inside the universe furnace, the Black Ink clan suffered the loss of a new royal lord and several pseudo-royal lords. If Mo Nayi hadn't quickly escaped in the end, he might have also been killed. Initially, he thought he had successfully prevented Xiangshan from advancing to the Ninth Order, which was a small consolation, but in the end, Xiangshan still succeeded. This time, the plan that was thought to be foolproof resulted in the loss of 7 pseudo-royal lords from the Black Ink clan, and allowed the 2 strongest living Ninth Order masters to break free. Mo Nayi felt discouraged all of a sudden. In the end, the human race is still favored by heaven. Ho! Suddenly, a roar shook the void from deep within, and Mo Nayi snapped back to attention. He turned his head in the direction of the commotion, and saw a massive figure floating in the distance. He understood immediately that it was coming from the 2 giant spirit gods that had been entangled for many years. These 2 giant spirit gods had been locked in combat for almost a millennium, their limbs intertwined like children in a playground scuffle. For years, they remained stuck in this stalemate. Suddenly, there was a commotion, indicating that the fighting had drawn attention. Soon, clashes could be heard from the depths of the void. Mo Nayi's expression changed as he quickly regained his composure and shouted, "Let's go!" The barren territory was vast enough to accommodate 2 giant spirit gods as they wreaked havoc on the battlefield, but if all 4 were to start an all-out fight, there would be no safe place in this entire great territory left. A battle of this level was beyond the ability of mere pseudo-royal lords to interfere with. Even Mo Nayi himself didn't want to get involved. Therefore, as soon as he realized what was about to happen, he decisively led the pseudo-royal lords to retreat. Shortly after they returned to the no-return pass through the territory gate, two huge figures finally appeared in the void. They were entangled with each other as they approached that from the side, and soon arrived near Ada's battlefield with his opponent. Brother! Ada's eyes lit up when he saw Aer's figure while engaged in a fierce battle with his opponent. The giant spirit gods, a unique race, had always been rare, and due to their innate behavior, they spend most of their time either traveling or hibernating, so they rarely cross paths. Ada had clearly not met his clansmen in years, so seeing one now was quite exciting. Soon after, though, he became enraged and shouted, "How dare you hit my brother? I'll kill you!" With those words, he disregarded his own opponent and charged straight towards Aer. The black-ink giant spirit god, who had been entangled with Aer, was slightly stunned but quickly gave chase. Though their movements seemed clumsy, every strike shook the heavens and the earth. Meanwhile, Aer faced off against the opponent who had originally belonged to Ada. When Ada threw his opponent aside, the black-ink giant spirit god naturally pursued and joined the chaotic fray. In an instant, the four giant spirit gods began wreaking havoc in the great territory, causing chaos and destruction. With each clash, the great territory was like a pond that had boulders tossed into it, sending ripples outwards in all directions. Wherever the ripples were, space became unstable and countless void cracks tore open. It was as if the entire barren territory was on the verge of collapsing. Several months later, a notice was sent from the Supreme Headquarters to the various frontline battlefields. Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing, who had both been stationed in Wind Mist territory for thousands of years, had returned. The humans gained 2 more Ninth Order Masters, with Xiao Xiao assuming command of the Soaring Cloud Army, while Wu Qing led the Purple Feather Army. Furthermore, the humans had an additional giant spirit god as an ally, which restrained the black ink giant spirit god that was trapped for many years. The news spread and the morale of the humans soared. The boost in momentum allowed them to easily seize several great territories on various fronts. Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-22, Old Tree Blooms. 500 years. It has already been 500 years. Do you know how I managed to make it through these 500 years? The low voice was full of repression, helplessness, and a hint of anger, revealing the speaker's inner unrest. But there was no response. On the soul-warming lotus, Feng Tianxiai looked at Thunder Shadow as if he was an idiot. Thunder Shadow immediately lost his composure and complained, "You should have replied by asking me how. If you don't ask, how am I supposed to continue?" Childish. Feng Tianxiai threw out a comment casually. Upon hearing that, Thunder Shadow became deeply hurt and looked helpless. "It's so boring to be with someone like you. Surely no woman has ever liked you." Feng Tianxiai chuckled. "I have many descendants. Big brother, how's this universe world?" Ignoring him, Thunder Shadow turned his head and asked Yang Kai. Soon Yang Kai's response came. "The world principles here are close to perfection, and there are signs of simple life. This can be considered a newly born universe world. Perhaps in a few years, real living creatures will appear." Thunder Shadow immediately became excited. "Doesn't that mean we are getting closer to the 3,000 worlds?" According to Yang Kai's previous speculation, by exploring the universe worlds along the way and observing the completeness of their world principles, one could determine whether the direction of travel was correct. The closer they got to the 3,000 worlds, the more complete the world principles in the universe worlds would be. Yang Kai had been constantly correcting their direction and rushing forward during these last 500 years. The universe worlds they encountered along the way indeed had more complete world principles as predicted. This universe world had its world principles fully taken shape, and there were now some of the simplest forms of life emerging. If there was life, it meant that this universe world had the conditions for life to exist. Perhaps after another million years of evolution, some unique creatures specific to this universe world would emerge. They were heading in the right direction, so all that was left was time. Yang Kai had been returning from the edge of the universe, and it did indeed take a lot of time. It had been 500 years, yet he still couldn't find his way back. 500 years had passed since the universe furnace closed. Since Yang Kai was unsure of the state of the war between the human race and the Black Ink clan, he had to hurry back. Without staying much longer in this universe world, he continued on his journey. 100 years later, when Yang Kai descended to another universe world to investigate the situation, he discovered that there were indeed living creatures in it. Most of the living creatures lived in the vast seas, with few living on land. The entire universe world was covered with green vegetation, giving it a lush appearance. With the emergence of living creatures, it meant that the universe world was now fully alive, and had the potential to give rise to sentient creatures like humans in the star boundary. Yang Kai once again attempted to connect with the world tree, but to no avail. The various universe worlds in the 3,000 worlds were interdependent with the world tree, with each world fruit on the world tree reflecting the state of each universe world. If one died, its corresponding world fruit would wither away as well. This universe world was vibrant with vitality, but it had no connection to the world tree at all. Ultimately, it was because the power of the world tree had not yet reached this place. After all, this place was just too far away from the 3,000 worlds. Yang Kai couldn't help but recall his previous speculations after hearing Thunder Shadow's casual remark that left him with much to ponder. Was the universe furnace the thing that created the 3,000 worlds, and the Black Ink battlefield? What about beyond? Is there truly only one universe? Are there more unknown universes beyond this one? Perhaps the 3,000 worlds is one universe, and the Black Ink battlefield is another. At his current location, Yang Kai believed he was in a much deeper part of the Black Ink battlefield, a place that neither the humans nor Black Ink clan had ever set foot in. If it were truly the same universe though, why couldn't the power of the world tree reach this place, where the world principles were already fully established, and living beings had even emerged? Yang Kai found himself deep in thought. Perhaps, I can find a way to connect this universe world to the world tree? If I succeed, I could use the old tree's power to return to Grand Ancient Ruins boundary without wasting any more time and energy on the journey. The road ahead was clearly still quite long, and though Yang Kai used space secret techniques to speed up his travel, it still took him 600 years with no sign of the end. At this point, he was uncertain when he would finally see the familiar landscape again. Then, Yang Kai had an idea. He had an item that he could use to test his theory. Without hesitation, he soared into the air and found a mountain valley filled with the fragrance of flowers. Then, he opened the portal to his small universe and moved a towering tree out of it. It was a world tree clone. This was not the one that belonged to him, but to Feng Tianci. During the union of the three selves, Feng Tianci's small universe merged completely with Yang Kai's, strengthening the size of his small universe and adding to his heritage. Naturally, the world tree clone was brought into Yang Kai's small universe as well. Yang Kai already had one, so a second one was redundant. He had intended to find a suitable person to give it to and help them grow quickly, but he had never expected to be needing to use it in the current situation. Surging his world force, Yang Kai dug a large pit in the mountain valley and planted the world tree clone in it. He wasn't worried about it not surviving as the world tree was a mystical and unparalleled entity. The simple root planted in the star boundary by Yang Kai previously had grown into a towering tree, so a complete tree would naturally thrive. After completing this, Yang Kai did not continue on his journey, but instead sat down under the tree and waited quietly. He didn't know if his plan would work, and even if it did, he didn't know how many years it would take. Quietly resigning himself to the possibility of wasting another 100 years, Yang Kai hoped that his plan would bear fruit within that time frame. If it didn't, he would dig up the world tree clone and continue his journey. It would only be 100 years, so it wasn't too bad. Moreover, he wasn't planning to just sit and wait. Although he had advanced to the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm, and had even taken a big step forward in his cultivation by merging Feng Tianci's small universe with his, it did not mean he would be satisfied with that. He still had room for improvement. His future enemies would no longer be limited to the territory lords and royal lords of the Black Ink clan. He might even have to face Mo, who was in the creation realm, so he needed to be stronger. The martial Dao was a long journey of exploration, accumulating strength and experience bit by bit. He had a lot of cultivation materials on hand, and could refine them to continuously strengthen his own heritage. As time passed, sets of material turned into dust in Yang Kai's hands. In the grand ancient ruins boundary, the world tree stood majestic and grand as a precious treasure born along with heavens and earth. When the heavens and earth split, it had already come into existence at almost the same time as the first primordial light. Its birth was rooted in the numerous universe worlds of the 3,000 worlds, and its existence was intimately linked with the life or death of those universe worlds. The peak world tree was covered in world fruits, and every branch was bent under the weight of the fruits. But as the Black Ink clan invaded the 3,000 worlds, one by one the universe worlds were corrupted by the Black Ink strength, causing them to die, which resulted in the withering of world fruits in droves. Until today, there were only slightly over 2,000 fruits left on its branches. Thankfully, Yang Kai was able to save a large number of universe worlds by refining them in the past. Otherwise, the world tree would have already withered away completely. Despite this, the world tree still appeared old and feeble. The loss of so many universe worlds in the 3,000 worlds had drained the world tree of its vitality, so it spent most of its time standing in silence apart from when Yang Kai visited it. It could do nothing to stop the calamity befalling the 3,000 worlds, and if the human race were to lose, the world tree would perish with them. Suddenly, an old face appeared on the thick trunk with a look of surprise and doubt showing on its brow. It vaguely felt that something in a very distant place seemed to have a faint resonance with itself, but this feeling flashed by, making it difficult to determine its authenticity. After a brief moment of hesitation, the old face on the trunk gradually disappeared. The withering and falling of world fruits caused its vitality to plummet, leaving it with little energy to think about minor issues. Most of the time over the years, it had been asleep, only waking when Yang Kai contacted it. In the distant void, Yang Kai sat cross-legged under the tree in that universe world, constantly refining various materials to enhance his strength. The towering tree behind him danced in the wind, while the massive roots began to intertwine deep in the earth in a place invisible to the naked eye, madly devouring the power of this universe world and merging with it. Years later, in the grand ancient ruins boundary, the old tree suddenly woke up from its slumber, and the old face appeared once again on its thick trunk. It clearly carried a puzzled look this time as it felt that something strange had happened to itself, but because it had just awakened, it was difficult to determine what this change was. Only after carefully examining itself did the old tree suddenly realize. A branch trembled and drooped down, and on the trunk, the old face of the old tree showed a look of pleasant surprise and doubt, changing alternatively. This was all because, on that branch, a little flower bud had sprouted. The old tree was shocked. It actually bloomed. This had never happened before. It was born with heaven and earth and had hung with world fruits since its birth, with each world fruit corresponding to a universe world in the 3,000 worlds. But it had never experienced something like blooming, and for a moment, the old tree was a bit confused. Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-23, Finally Back. The blooming of the old tree was an unprecedented event that had never happened before. It wanted to understand what had happened to itself, so after careful examination, it sensed a very distant location through the flower bud. Suddenly, it understood that the sensation that had arisen several years ago was not just a figment of its imagination. Although the sensation was still vague and intermittent, it did actually exist. Why do I have this strange connection with a place so far away? Old Tree was completely baffled. Because of the unusual occurrence, Old Tree remained vigilant and did not fall into a deep sleep in the following years, occasionally investigating the situation of the flower bud. As time passed, the little flower bud gradually bloomed, and with the falling of the petals, a tiny world fruit appeared. Old Tree was completely shocked. For countless years, it had only experienced the withering and falling of its world fruits, and it had never given birth to a new one. Furthermore, it did not understand what caused this sudden change. The only thing it knew was that the birth of this world fruit was not harmful to itself, because with the birth of this new fruit, a weak vitality was injected into its old body. Several dozen years later, when the world fruit grew to the size of a fist and became completely solidified, it suddenly felt a faint call from it. It had experienced this many times before. It was like when Yang Kai needed to borrow its strength to arrive before it. Under the World Tree clone in this universe world, Yang Kai was overjoyed. He had finally made contact with the old tree, and although it seemed a bit unstable, the current result confirmed his previous speculation. Over the past several dozen years, the World Tree clone had undoubtedly grown significantly, and had already completely merged with this universe world. After devouring a large amount of world force in this place, the World Tree clone began to nourish this land too. Over the years, Yang Kai tried connecting with the World Tree every once in a while but made no progress. That made him think that his previous idea was wrong. It wasn't until this moment that he finally made contact with the World Tree in the faraway Grand Ancient Ruins boundary. This made him feel delighted. In the Grand Ancient Ruins boundary, the old tree understood roughly what was happening. The World Tree clone planted was technically also its soul clone. It was not aware of the situation before because the World Tree clone had not fully merged with the universe world it was planted on. But now that it had, despite being separated by the endless void, the old tree could vaguely sense the situation through the World Tree clone now. It couldn't help but marvel at what was happening as it had never experienced anything like it before. Although their connection was not very clear, Yang Kai's intentions were crystal clear to Old Tree. Over the years, every time Yang Kai connected to it, it meant that he needed to enter the Grand Ancient Ruins boundary. So, Old Tree immediately exerted its power, causing its massive body to start shaking. In the next moment, Old Tree's aged face suddenly changed. Under the World Tree clone in that universe world, Yang Kai's figure abruptly disappeared as soon as the old tree began to act. It was as if Yang Kai had entered an unpredictable and indescribable space in an instant. He had experienced this many times before, so he was already used to it. However, Yang Kai quickly realized that something was wrong. Every time he used the power of the World Tree to enter the Grand Ancient Ruins boundary, it was basically an instantaneous thing, but this time, it seemed to be taking a long time. After traveling for a long time in that strange space, Yang Kai still hadn't emerged. Not to mention, the connection between him and the World Tree became very vague, almost to the point of being non-existent. Yang Kai was shocked. He was only able to enter the Grand Ancient Ruins boundary by borrowing the power of the World Tree, because he had saved and refined more than 2,000 universe worlds in the past. Later, he placed these universe worlds on the corresponding world fruits on the old tree. It could be said that these universe worlds and their corresponding world fruits all had his imprint on them. It was precisely because of these marks that he had an unbreakable connection with Old Tree, which allowed him to use the latter's power to enter the Grand Ancient Ruins boundary. Having a connection was the reason why they could sense each other. Now that their connection was almost about to be cut off, it became a nightmare for Yang Kai. If the connection was truly cut off, he didn't know what he would encounter. It was highly likely that he would be trapped on the way of trying to enter the Grand Ancient Ruins boundary, and it would be difficult for him to find his way out. Thankfully, the blurry connection was re-established again when it was on the verge of cutting off, clearly because Old Tree had also sensed it, and was exerting all its efforts. Without daring to delay, Yang Kai immediately used his space secret technique to move forward quickly. However, it was in vain. The road ahead was long, and the end was nowhere in sight. Despite Old Tree's best efforts, their connection was rapidly weakening again. It made Yang Kai frantic, realizing that he was still too far away from the Old Tree to be easily guided into the Grand Ancient Ruins boundary, even with the Old Tree's power. If their connection was completely lost, he might never find his way back. At this critical moment, Yang Kai quickly immersed himself in thought to figure out a plan while rushing forward. He had weathered many storms over the years, so he developed a calm demeanor in the face of crises. Suddenly, Yang Kai lit up as he thought of a solution. He quickly opened a portal to his small universe, and a towering tree appeared in it. It was his own World Tree clone. By planting a World Tree clone in a newborn universe world, he was able to establish a connection with the old tree. If a planted World Tree clone had such an effect, then his own World Tree clone must also have it. Sure enough, when Yang Kai did this, the blurry connection between him and the old tree instantly became strong. At the next moment, Yang Kai felt the power of his small universe uncontrollably flowing out like a dam breaking, gushing like a raging river. In the grand ancient ruins boundary, the old tree's old face was full of hardship, obviously nearing its limit. The giant world tree was also shaking constantly until at a certain moment, ripples appeared on the newly formed world fruit, followed by a figure breaking out of it and falling in front of the old tree. Subsequently, the shaking trunk gradually calmed down, and on the tree's surface, the old tree's aged face looked even more withered and old. Looking at the familiar figure that suddenly appeared, it couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. I've really overexerted myself. Yang Kai was also gasping for breath, half kneeling on the ground, his face slightly pale. He had just gone through a very dangerous journey. If he hadn't thought of using his own world tree clone at the last moment, he would have had no way to return to the grand ancient ruins boundary. Though he managed to return, the world force in his small universe had been greatly depleted. He was currently at the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm, and the heritage of his small universe was extremely rich. However, this one action had consumed nearly half of his strength. If it weren't for his world tree clone isolating and protecting his small universe, Void World would have been in turmoil. After calming down a bit, Yang Kai stood up and looked up at the familiar world tree, feeling joy in his heart. He had finally returned. Where did you go? Old Tree suddenly spoke up. He had guided Yang Kai here many times before, and although it did take a toll on it, it was still within an acceptable range. But this time, the guidance had severely damaged its foundation, and almost failed. Old Tree was very curious about where Yang Kai went, as in its perception, its clone had been left in a very, very distant place. Yang Kai sat in front of the old tree and sighed. It's a long story. He recounted his experiences simply, and upon hearing how the universe furnace created the universe worlds from chaos, and how Yang Kai returned from the edge of the universe, even Old Tree, who had existed since ancient times, was flabbergasted. It knew about the universe furnace, but had no idea that universe worlds were created from the sea of chaos beyond the universe. If that were true, then its own birth could also be said to have originated from the universe furnace, as it was the universe furnace that gave birth to the universe worlds, which were symbiotic with the world tree. After telling his story, Yang Kai couldn't help but complain. Old Tree, why didn't you tell me earlier about the wonders of your clones? If he had known, he might have been able to return even sooner. But on second thought, even if he did know about it, it would probably be useless. His return this time was already the extreme limit. Even if Yang Kai planted the clone at the furthest reaches of the universe, and someone made a connection with the old tree, he might not have been able to use its power to return to the grand ancient ruins boundary. Old Tree fell silent for a moment before saying, I too had no idea until now. Upon hearing that, Yang Kai was speechless. It made sense though, given the countless ages that passed. Perhaps Old Tree had given away some of its clones before, but all of them had undoubtedly been refined by those masters. No master before Yang Kai was willing to plant the clone in a universe world, as they had all used them for their own purposes. Although Yang Kai had planted world tree clones in both the Star Boundary and the Myriad Monsters world previously, those two universes' world already had world fruits corresponding to the world tree. Thus, the true use of the clones could not be fully realized. This time, Yang Kai had a sudden inspiration and planted a world tree clone in a very remote location, which created an inseparable connection between that universe world and the world tree. It could be said that from ancient times to the present, no one had ever done what Yang Kai did. So of course Old Tree did not know about it, becoming surprised when a branch suddenly bloomed and bore fruit. Though the world tree existed for a long time and saw and experienced many things, it didn't mean it was all-knowing and all-powerful. At the very least, it was not aware of the creation of the universe worlds by the universe furnace from chaos. Common people, and even Old Tree, only thought of the universe furnace as an opportunity, but the true mystery of the universe furnace was only known to Yang Kai. Old Tree, I have your clone in my small universe too. Doesn't that mean that in the future, no matter where I am, you can guide me here? Yang Kai asked, only realizing this after experiencing today's events. Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-24 Source. If that were the case, then his actions would be much easier in the future. Even if he encountered the same situation as before, he wouldn't have to spend too much time rushing around since he could simply open up his small universe, borrow the connection between his World Tree clone and the World Tree, and return at will when needed. That was what he thought, but Yang Kai couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The situation seemed more complicated than he had imagined. Old Tree didn't directly answer the question, but instead said, "Think about it. What is the source that helps me to guide you to the grand ancient ruins boundary and the many universe worlds from here?" Source. Yang Kai mused. Upon closer inspection, he realized that he was able to enter the grand ancient ruins boundary through the power of the World Tree, because he had refined over 2,000 universe worlds in the past. Each of those universe worlds reflected the world fruits on Old Tree's body, creating an inseparable connection between them. Therefore, regardless of where Yang Kai was, he only needed a living universe world as a medium in order to use the power of the Old Tree to enter the grand ancient ruins boundary. It was also for this reason that he specially refined a universe world from the 3,000 worlds and brought it to the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, so that he could easily investigate the situation there at any time. And every time he left the grand ancient ruins boundary, he needed a world fruit as a medium. For example, if he wanted to go to the star boundary, he needed to find the corresponding world fruit. If he wanted to go to the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, he just had to find the world fruit that corresponded to the universe world he had left behind previously. Yang Kai suddenly realized, the source is the world fruit. The face on the trunk of the tree nodded. You can also say it's the still living universe worlds. So my plan won't work. His small universe didn't have a corresponding world fruit. When he returned just now, he only strengthened the connection between himself and the Old Tree using his World Tree clone. After all, each clone was a part of the Old Tree, and there was an inseparable connection between each clone and the Old Tree. Realizing this, Yang Kai became slightly disappointed. Then Old Tree suddenly said, "I may not be able to guide you to the grand ancient ruins boundary in the future at all." Yang Kai was taken aback as he realized the problem. Was the consumption too great this time? He had just noticed that Old Tree's condition was worse than the last time he saw it. The leaves on the huge tree crown were slightly yellowed and showed signs of withering. Old Tree responded with a grunt. The distance was too great. Although my clone did establish a connection, my power has not completely radiated to that range. I'm afraid I will fall into a deep sleep soon. What can I do to help? Yang Kai asked. With Old Tree sleeping, he would definitely lose a means of quick travel. At the very least, he would not be able to go to the primordial heaven's source grand restriction whenever he wanted. Old Tree pondered for a moment, and then shook its trunk. You probably can't help much unless there are more universe worlds that can establish a connection with me like this time. However, that was unrealistic. All the remaining universe worlds in the 3,000 worlds had already been corrupted by black ink strength and had died. Where could there be more universe worlds? On Yang Kai's return journey, he did see many newly born universe worlds, but Old Tree's power could not cover such a far distance. Though he could use the World Tree clones, Old Tree could not give him any more of those either. The 3 World Tree clones back then were already Old Tree's limit. It could be said that it might never wake up after this deep sleep. Only when the human race completely defeated the Black Ink clan, and after the 3,000 worlds went through generations of recuperation, might there be a chance for it to restore its vitality. Yang Kai fell silent. Since he had established a connection with Old Tree years ago and received Old Tree's assistance, he felt quite helpless not being able to provide it with any help this time. Where do you want to go now? Old Tree asked. Before I fall asleep, I can still send you there for the last time. The star boundary. Yang Kai slowly stood up, cupped his fist, and looked at Old Tree's aged face on the trunk. Please rest assured and recuperate. I will take care of the matter with the Black Ink clan. When you wake up, it will be after the disaster has passed. Old Tree chuckled. I'll be waiting for that day. Hopefully, that day would come soon. Yang Kai nodded, then quickly headed towards the world fruit corresponding to the star boundary. At the same time, Old Tree exerted its last bit of strength. In an instant, The world turned upside down and it rapidly enlarged in Yang Kai's vision. In the grand ancient ruins boundary, Old Tree used its last bit of power, and its face slowly dissipated. In the moment of its consciousness falling asleep, it suddenly realized something. This time, Yang Kai seemed to have already reached the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm. It was so weak before that it had not noticed it. Somewhere close to the star boundary, Yang Kai broke through space and appeared. As always, the moment he showed up, a powerful divine sense probed from somewhere in the star boundary to investigate the situation. This was the master who was in charge of the star boundary, using his divine sense to check the situation. Open Heaven Realm masters in general were not so sensitive. Even those who reached the Eighth Order would not have sensed Yang Kai while he was concealing himself. However, the great emperors of the star boundary were capable of such feats. As great emperors, they were intimately tied to the star boundary and recognized by its will. With their hearts set on it, they could not miss any suspicious situations with their divine sense in the range of the star boundary. With a touch of his divine sense, the other party clearly perceived Yang Kai's identity and quickly withdrew it. The next moment, a figure soared into the sky from somewhere in the star boundary, appearing soundlessly and swiftly before Yang Kai. Looking at the visitor, Yang Kai smiled slightly. "Senior Ironblood, it's been a while." The visitor was none other than Ironblood Great Emperor, Zhan Wuhen. He looked at Yang Kai with suspicion before nodding. "You're back?" When the universe furnace closed and Yang Kai disappeared without a trace, not only did the Black Ink clan speculate that he was trapped inside, but some of the high-ranking authority figures of the human race did too. Although they didn't know why Yang Kai would be trapped inside, they had no way to rescue him, so they could only let it be. However, a small number of people still firmly believed that even if Yang Kai was trapped in the universe furnace, he wouldn't be stuck for too long. They believed that he would break free and return eventually without needing to wait until the next opening of the universe furnace. Therefore, when Zhan Wuhen saw Yang Kai, he wasn't too surprised since he had watched Yang Kai grow up from when he was still a young man. Yang Kai could do what ordinary people couldn't, so escaping from the universe furnace shouldn't be anything to him. "Are you injured?" Yang Kai frowned. Zhan Wuhen clearly had quite severe injuries on his body. At this moment, his face was pale and his aura was unstable. With his cultivation at the Eighth Order Open Heaven realm, it was evident how intense his war had become. Yang Kai, on the other hand, was not surprised that Zhan Wuhen had ascended to the Eighth Order, given that the great emperors of the star boundary had all directly broken through to the Sixth Order realm. Additionally, with their unique advantages when cultivating in the star boundary, they had all already advanced to the Eighth Order many years ago. At this moment, Zhan Wuhen was already at the peak of the Eighth Order Open Heaven realm, but because of the innate limitations of the Open Heaven realm method, he couldn't make another breakthrough. He did not enter when the universe furnace opened. In fact, Yang Kai did not see any masters from the star boundary inside. Zhan Wuhen said lightly, "I was injured while fighting outside. It's nothing special." If it weren't for his serious injuries, he wouldn't have come back to the star boundary to recuperate. To him, battles were the essence of life. After a moment of silence, Zhan Wuhen continued, "Ice Feather and Heaven's revelations died." Upon receiving the news, Yang Kai's expression trembled as he closed his eyes and sighed. There was never a war with no casualties. In the countless years of battle against the Black Ink clan, there were naturally countless deaths. Whether it was on the Black Ink battlefield or later on the Great Territory battlefields, the reaping of life had become a norm of war. Even Yang Kai's own Dawn Squad, which he had led back then, had lost several members under his watch. Ice Feather and Heaven's revelations were great emperors of the star boundary, who already ascended to the Eighth Order Open Heaven realm for a long time, but in this catastrophic war that swept across the universe, what use was it being in the Eighth Order? Many times, it was difficult to even protect oneself from the Black Ink clan with such a cultivation. Frankly speaking, Yang Kai was not that familiar with these two great emperors. It was only because they were fellow people from the star boundary, which gave him a sense of kinship compared to those masters from the cave heavens and paradises. Even so, when he heard the news of their deaths, his heart sank. Is the war that intense? Yang Kai furrowed his brows and asked. Zhang Wuhen nodded. You'll have to ask the Supreme Headquarters for the specifics. They have a better grasp of the situation. He paused, then continued. Their sacrifice was not in vain. The Star Boundary's reputation was not tarnished, and their deaths also made room for successors. There are a few new great emperors who have emerged, all who directly ascended to the 7th Order, with the potential to reach the 9th Order in the future. Every universe world had a limit to the number of great emperors it could sustain. The Star Boundary's limit was 10 many years ago, but with the continuous nourishment of the World Tree clone, its capacity had increased, and now it can support 12 great emperors. However, as long as the older generation great emperors remained, it was difficult for newcomers to rise to power. With the fall of Ice Feather and Heaven's Revelations, 2 great emperor positions were vacated in the Star Boundary. Currently, there were many talents in the Star Boundary who had already directly ascended to the 7th Order, so they should be able to gain recognition from the Star Boundary's will and become great emperors in the future, achieving twice the result with half the effort when they cultivate in the Star Boundary. But Yang Kai shook his head. There isn't much time left for them to grow. The time it took to advance from 7th Order to 9th Order was incredibly long. Even if they became great emperors of the Star Boundary, it would take thousands of years for them to fully mature. It was better to rely on the many 8th Order masters than them at present. The good seedlings who directly advanced to 7th Order in the first generation were now all 8th Order Open Heaven Realm masters. Perhaps in a short time, they could advance to the 9th Order. As for the human race, as long as the first new generation of 9th Order Open Heaven Realm masters finally arrived, there would be an endless stream of 9th Order masters emerging. Over the past thousands of years, the accumulation of the human race's power had already reached a point where they were ready to soar. Once a certain critical point was reached, the human race would inevitably produce countless elites. This was the power that the human race could rely on in the future, and it was also due to the Open Heaven Realm Cradle, the Star Boundary. As Yang Kai spoke, he connected his mind with Void World and projected it into the Void Dao Temple. Soon, the portal to his small universe opened, and figures poured out of it one after another. Over the years, Void Dao Temple had accumulated a large number of good seedlings who could ascend to the Open Heaven Realm. Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-25, Return. In Yang Kai's small universe, time flowed at a different pace from the outside world. And this flow rate only increased as his mastery over the Tao of Time and his strength grew. At present, with his cultivation at the 9th Order Open Heaven Realm, and his mastery of the Tao of Time at the 8th level, the flow rate in his small universe had reached a 10-to-1 ratio compared to the outside world. In other words, while 1 day passed outside, 10 days had already elapsed in his small universe. It had been many years since Yang Kai last brought out talents from the Void Dao Temple. In terms of the passing of time in his small universe, it had been over 10,000 years. Over such a long time, a considerable number of outstanding talents had naturally accumulated in the Void Dao Temple. These people had already reached their limits within the Void Dao Temple, and would generally ascend to the Open Heaven Realm shortly after leaving Void World, requiring a master to guide and protect them. However, Yang Kai always left this matter to his head manager to handle, and since Hua Qingxi was not present today, he handed the task to Zhang Wuhen. When all the Emperor Realm Masters gathered, Yang Kai said, "I'm entrusting these people to you. Manager Hua knows how to handle them." Zhang Wuhen nodded and asked, "Are you not going back?" Yang Kai looked towards the Star Boundary and shook his head. No need. He had just returned, and knowing how intense the war had become, he needed to head to the Supreme Headquarters right away. Saying so, he waved his hand and took a step forward, immediately disappearing. The group of disciples who just left the Void Dao Temple didn't understand what was going on, and simply watched the Dao Lord disappear far off into the distance. They could only bow and send him off. Meanwhile, in High Heaven Palace's pill room, in front of a huge alchemy furnace, Xia Ning Chang, who had her face veiled, was using different techniques to control the furnace's fire and refine spirit pills. The process of refining these spirit pills was not difficult, as it was a standard kind of healing pill that was in high demand on the battlefield. With her being an alchemy great-grandmaster, she naturally had no difficulty in refining them. Suddenly, Xia Ningchang paused for a moment and looked up at the sky outside. Although thick walls and heavy barriers were blocking her view, her clear eyes seemed to ignore all obstructions, and she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure that was already far away. The flames in the furnace of the alchemy furnace flickered slightly. Then Xia Ningchang quickly focused her mind and controlled the heat, continuing to refine the spirit pills. Her eyes instantly became crescent-shaped as she became extremely happy and joyful upon seeing that figure. Her techniques changed constantly, and the alchemy furnace echoed with the sound of the spirit pills forming, a clear and pleasant sound. Previously, when Mi Jingluan came to the High Heaven Palace to talk to her about Yang Kai's disappearance, Xia Ningchang had acted calm and not worried about Yang Kai's safety, but in reality, how could she not be concerned at all? She simply had enough confidence in her husband to one day return. She believed that no matter what difficulties and dangers he faced, no matter where he was, he would definitely come back because this was his home, and there were still people waiting for him there. Now that he had finally returned, Xia Ningchang could finally put down the worry that had been weighing on her heart. Outside of the star boundary, Hua Qingxi urgently led a group of Open Heaven Realm Masters over after receiving Zhan Wuhen's message. When she saw the many Emperor Realm Masters gathered around, she was slightly startled, but quickly realized what was happening and exclaimed in delight, "Palace Master has returned?" This was not the first time she had seen such a scene of many emperors who were about to ascend to the Open Heaven Realm gathered together, and she knew exactly where these Emperor Realm Masters came from. Zhan Wuhen nodded and pointed to those Emperor Realm Masters, saying, "I'll leave this to you." After speaking, he flashed back to the star boundary. He was seriously injured and needed to continue healing. If he had not sensed Yang Kai's aura, he would not have ventured out of seclusion so rashly. Originally, Hua Qingxi wanted to ask more about Yang Kai's condition, but Zhan Wuhen left too quickly, giving her no chance to speak. She was annoyed, but the Palace Master's return was good news. For years, there had been rumors that their Palace Master was trapped in the universe furnace, and many people were worried about him. Now that the Palace Master had returned though, those people should be able to rest assured. Senior, I can't hold on much longer." A weak voice suddenly came from the side. Hua Qingxi turned her head and saw a Dao Temple disciple with a strained expression, his aura fluctuating violently, clearly on the verge of a breakthrough. They had been cultivating in Void Dao Temple for many years, and had already reached the limit of their cultivation with their condensed Dao seal and refined element powers, but because of the suppression of Yang Kai's small universe, they were unable to break through. Now that they had left his small universe and the suppression was gone, they were basically ready to burst forth. Not only the speaker, but many others showed signs of imminent breakthrough. Hua Qingxi was used to this kind of situation already, and immediately ordered these disciples to spread out and find suitable positions. Afterwards, she had the Open Heaven Realm Masters she brought to stand guard for the disciples. She personally distributed Heavenly Yuan Seal stabilizing pills to the Dao Temple disciples, which drastically increased the success rate of their breakthrough. It should be noted that those selected from Void Dao Temple were all talented individuals. At the very least, they could directly ascend to the Fifth Order Open Heaven Realm, and many among them could directly ascend to the Sixth Order. Every now and then, there were even a few who directly ascended to the Seventh Order. Without the Heavenly Yuan Seal stabilizing pill, it was likely that some would fail in their breakthrough. However, over the years there had not been a single disciple from Void Dao Temple who suffered such a fate. This was largely thanks to the efficacy of the Heavenly Yuan Seal stabilizing pills. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. On the other hand, Yang Kai had arrived at the territory gate of High Heaven Territory. Security was extremely tight here, with several Eighth Order Masters personally guarding the portal, with a purifying black ink battleship sealed with a large amount of purifying light on standby. High Heaven Territory and the New Great Territory were now the most important rear bases for the human race, and the foundation of their existence. Their importance was equivalent to the control of the no-return pass by the Black Ink clan. As the only gateway in and out of these territories, This territory gate naturally received the highest level of attention and was highly guarded. The purifying black ink battleship stationed there could prevent any black ink disciples from infiltrating, and all soldiers returning from the front lines, regardless of their cultivation, had to pass through it. Young Kai walked over without hiding his tracks. The Eighth Order masters guarding the area naturally noticed his aura, and each of them became suspicious and uncertain. There were only a few Ninth Order masters among the human race, and all of them were well known and usually leading an army to fight the Black Ink clan. Therefore, it was natural for them to be puzzled by the sudden appearance of another Ninth Order master in the rear area. The group of Eighth Order masters quickly gathered together and waited attentively. It wasn't until Yang Kai's figure appeared in their sight that one of the Eighth Order masters suddenly realized, "It's him." Saying so, he showed a happy expression and took the initiative to welcome Yang Kai. As he approached, he cupped his fist and said, "Yang, I suddenly don't know how to address you." He was much older than Yang Kai in terms of age, and was also a seasoned veteran Eighth Order master. They had met each other a few times before, and he had always addressed Yang Kai as junior brother. But now that Yang Kai had advanced to the Ninth Order, calling him junior brother seemed inappropriate. Besides, his seniority was much higher than Yang Kai's, so calling him sir was also quite inappropriate. After a moment of consideration, this Eighth Order master called out, "Army Commander Yang." In terms of titles, Yang Kai was still Army Commander of the Profound Nether Army, though currently, Ouyang Lai was taking charge of it. However, as long as the Supreme Headquarters didn't issue a clear transfer order, Yang Kai would always be the Army Commander of Profound Nether Army. Yang Kai recognized the person and greeted him. "Senior brother, hi." After all, they did meet each other a few times, so Yang Kai had some impression of this veteran Eighth Order master before him. Chi Hai's heart warmed as Yang Kai addressed him as senior brother, obviously trying to avoid the awkwardness of addressing him according to their cultivations. In the past, there was no need for such a thing as all Ninth Order masters had lived for countless years, with intimidating seniority and status, so the title of Old Ancestor was appropriate. But now the situation was different. Yang Kai had just ascended to the Ninth Order realm, and in the future, there would be more rising stars reaching that height as well. The title of Old Ancestor would no longer be suitable for the new generations. At this moment, many Eighth Order masters had gathered around. Whether they knew Yang Kai or not, they had already guessed his identity and bowed respectfully. The eyes of the younger generation Eighth Order masters were full of admiration and awe when they looked at Yang Kai. Even as they took their first steps on their martial Tao, Yang Kai's name had been famous, and many aspired to become like him. Now he stood before them as a Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm master, causing them all to secretly marvel that legends were indeed legends. Yang Kai was just passing through, and he wasn't familiar with the many Eighth Order masters here, so there wasn't much to talk about. After being routinely questioned by Chi Hai, he quickly departed. Passing through the territory gate, he arrived at the nearby Great Territory, and headed straight for the Universe Fragment where the Supreme Headquarters was located. Soon, the Universe Fragment was in sight. At a glance, there were figures on it, and many masters gathered around, busy doing who knew what. In the main conference hall, Mi Jingluan was studying the situation of the various battlefields, and discussing corresponding plans with many staff members. The staff members had different thoughts and often argued over some details, but ultimately Mi Jingluan was the one to make the final decision. The entire hall was bustling like a crowded marketplace. Suddenly Mi Jingluan turned and looked outside. The staff members who were arguing were immediately silenced, looking at him with surprise and suspicion. "This is..." Mi Jingluan frowned and took a few steps forward, coming outside the main hall. As he looked up, he saw a stream of light swiftly approaching from the void, appearing before him in the blink of an eye. Then the stream of light dispersed, revealing a familiar figure. Looking at the person who had suddenly appeared before him, Mi Jingluan couldn't help but blink his eyes, thinking he was imagining things. Yang Kai smiled and cupped his fist. "Senior brother Mi." Following Mi Jingluan, the other staff members became slightly shocked as well, and then began to stir, with low cries ringing out. "It's Yang Kai. Senior Yang has returned." Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-26, The Situation. Yang Kai was thought to be trapped in the universe furnace, and there had been no contact from him for over 600 years, so whether he was alive or dead was unknown. This was undoubtedly a blow to the human race, especially with the ongoing war between them and the Black Ink clan. While there were a few Ninth Order masters among the human race now, none of them had the total suppressive advantages over the pseudo-royal lords in battles, not even the veterans like Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing. In Mi Jingluan's understanding, the only one who could possibly achieve this was Yang Kai. Back when the Black Ink clan was holding their ground in the Great Territory battlefields, the war would not have been this difficult if Yang Kai was around. Mi Jingluan originally thought that he might have to wait until the next opening of the universe furnace for Yang Kai to have a chance to escape, but unexpectedly, he appeared before him right at this moment. Mi Jingluan was extremely surprised and couldn't help but ask, "How did you escape from the universe furnace?" Universe furnace? Yang Kai was taken aback at first but quickly realized that Mi Jingluan must have misunderstood something. It was understandable since he had been out of contact for so many years, so the logical assumption was that he was trapped in the universe furnace. He couldn't hold back his laughter as he explained, "I wasn't trapped in the universe furnace. Rather, it took me to the edge of the universe, and I had to spend quite some time returning." The edge of the universe? Mi Jingluan looked puzzled. "It's a long story." Yang Kai waved his hand, not wanting to talk about it as the war between the two races was the more crucial issue now. Even if others knew the universe furnace created all universe worlds from chaos, it was of no use to them. It could at most broaden their horizons, but hearing about it secondhand was not nearly as shocking as witnessing it personally. Though Mi Jingluan didn't ask any further, he had doubts in his mind. Where exactly was the edge of the universe? And how far away must it have been for Yang Kai to take hundreds of years to return even with his abilities? After composing himself, Mi Jingluan said, "You're back just in time. There are some things that I need you to do." He and many of his staff members were discussing a battle in a certain great territory that was in a worrying state, as they didn't have enough manpower to mobilize to support it. As such, Yang Kai's return was quite timely. Yang Kai nodded and said, "Just give me the order, senior brother. Come inside and we'll talk." Mi Jingluan held Yang Kai's arm and led him into the main hall. After a while, everyone took their seats. "Let me tell you about the current war situation," Mi Lingjun spoke. Yang Kai nodded, as he urgently needed to understand what was going on right now. The two sides had been at war since the universe furnace appeared, and it had been over 600 years since its closure. Yang Kai had no idea how the war had progressed during this time, or what the situation was like currently. He did ask Zhang Wuhen before, but the latter's understanding was not comprehensive enough, so they did not talk about it in detail. Naturally, the Supreme Headquarters had the most in-depth understanding of the situation. Mi Jingluan then gave a brief account of the hundreds of years of war. It was only now that Yang Kai learned that the human race had regained not just the dozen or so original Great Territory battlefields, but an additional 200 or so Great Territories. However, Yang Kai immediately felt that something was wrong. Even if the human race had produced several Ninth Order Masters and many Eighth Order Masters in the universe furnace, increasing their strength greatly, that shouldn't have been sufficient to produce such outstanding results. With his previous understanding of the Black Ink clan's background and forces, Yang Kai initially believed that the battle between the two sides would still be raging on the various Great Territory battlefields. After all, the Black Ink clan must now have dozens of pseudo-royal lords, so it should have been impossible to reclaim so many Great Territories, even though there were quite a number of Ninth Order Masters in the human race. Yang Kai didn't understand until he heard Mi Jingluan mention Emo Na Yi. The Black Ink clan retreated to advance, lengthening the human race's battle lines and dispersing their army's strength. Losing 200 or so Great Territories was not a significant detriment to the Black Ink clan, while the human race army had to leave some troops behind to defend these places in order to prevent the Black Ink clan from reoccupying them and cutting off the front lines from the rear. This was open intrigue by the Black Ink clan, but Mi Jingluan could do nothing even if he saw through their intentions. As a result, he could only try his best to keep the various human race armies steady and not reveal any vulnerabilities. Over the years, the Black Ink clan had taken many actions against the recovered Great Territories. However, they were mostly minor skirmishes that did not make much of an impact and were ultimately quashed by the station soldiers. Mi Jingluan also informed Yang Kai that Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing were finally freed, and his hidden hand had been played. In the barren territory, four giant spirit gods were currently engaged in a brutal death match. This was not surprising to Yang Kai. The Black Ink clan couldn't keep their trapped Black Ink giant spirit god unused. For them, the power that the Black Ink giant spirit god provided was simply too great. So once the two sides went to war, the Black Ink clan would find a way to release their trapped deity. Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing's strength was not enough to restrain a master of that caliber, but the hidden hand that Yang Kai left behind happened to be able to counter it. Speaking of which, the great battle in the barren territory has caused quite a lot of trouble for the Black Ink clan. A grin appeared on Mi Jingluan's face. Since the Black Ink clan captured the No-Return Pass, that place has been their foundation. In the past, the Black Ink clan had a large number of troops and resources transported from the No-Return Pass to the front lines on a near-daily basis. But now that the great battle of four giant spirit gods has affected the entire barren territory, the troops passing through that area often suffer losses from the fallout. Although it's not a significant attrition, in recent years, the Black Ink clan has lost at least 20% of their troops in the barren territory, which has eased some of the pressure on us. Yang Kai couldn't help but raise his brow. There's such a fortunate event? He didn't expect this turn of events. Initially, he only wanted to leave Ada to deal with the trapped Black Ink giant spirit god. However, now he realized that he had stumbled into some additional good fortune. It made sense once he thought about it, though. The battle between giant spirit gods was heaven-shaking and earth-destroying, and as the Black Ink clan's army set out from the No-Return Pass, they would inevitably have to pass through the barren territory. Anyone caught in the aftermath of such a battle would definitely not have a good end. It was only natural that the Black Ink clan were troubled by this, but since it was a giant spirit god's battle, it was doubtful anyone could intervene. Now the human race had 12 main armies, but only 6 of them had a Ninth Order master leading them. Luoting he led the Azure Sun Army, Xiangshan the Blood Flame Army, Ouyang Lai the Profound Nether Army, Wei Junyang the Langya Army, Xiao Xiao the Soaring Cloud Army, and Wu Qing the Purple Feather Army. The remaining 6 armies were Shocking Thunder, Red Flame, Burning Moon, Twin Instrument, Azure Dawn, and Jade Cicada. Although I had dispatched many divine spirits to assist the latter 6 armies, they are still lacking in comparison to the others, especially the Red Flame Army, which is now in a standoff with the Black Ink clan in the E5 Great Territory. Saying so, Mi Jingluan pointed his finger casually, and the huge universe chart in front of him suddenly expanded, presenting a map of the void with the E5 Great Territory on it. Not every great territory in the 3,000 great territories had a distinct namesake. Just like High Heaven Territory, it used to only have a code name because there were no powerful sects present, nor did the people inside have the ability to break free from the constraints of their universe worlds. It was not until the star boundary rose to fame, and because Yang Kai was from it, that the territory hosting the star boundary was renamed High Heaven Territory. Similarly, the new Great Territory was also just a code name in the universe chart. However, the myriad monsters world in the new Great Territory now had the qualifications to represent it. Perhaps in the future, when the universe chart was updated, the new Great Territory would be christened the Myriad Monsters Territory. Only when a great territory had a powerful great force as a hegemon would it be named after that force. E5 Territory was a barren great territory. Although there were a few universe worlds, there were no second-class great forces. The cultivation of the top masters in the few universe worlds there was not even comparable to that of the star boundary in its early years. Back when the Black Ink clan invaded E5 Territory, the living beings in those few universe worlds were almost all butchered. Now the Red Flame Army had arrived and was fighting for control of this great territory, while the Black Ink clan was deploying their troops to resist. Looking at the universe chart, red and black light occupied roughly half of the territory each. The red represented the Red Flame Army, and the black represented the Black Ink clan. The Black Ink clan has clearly been waiting for this moment, after giving up so many great territories. We suspect they are preparing a full counterattack against the Red Flame Army. In recent years, the Black Ink clan has been mobilizing their masters to E5 territory, and in the last war, the Red Flame Army was already having a difficult time holding on while suffering many casualties. If we continue like this, without more support, the Red Flame Army won't hold on for much longer. Yang Kai nodded lightly and asked, Senior Brother Mi, do you want me to assume command of the Red Flame Army? Mi Jingluan nodded. Originally, we planned to retreat from E5 and redistribute the Red Flame Army into the other 11 if we couldn't hold on. But since you're back, it would be better to hand the Red Flame Army over to you. After Yang Kai pondered about it for a moment, he said, I don't have any objections, but I have some ideas of my own. Mi Jingluan gestured for him to continue. Please share. When I led Profound Nether in Profound Nether territory, there were no Black Ink clansmen who dared to cause trouble. If I take over the Red Flame Army, obviously the Black Ink clan won't dare to provoke us anymore. In this way, wherever Red Flame goes, the Black Ink clan will surely retreat and avoid it. Even so, if we can't kill more Black Ink clan masters, it would be meaningless to occupy more great territories. Mi Jingluan nodded and responded, Our goal now is to kill, especially the pseudo-royal lords. The number of pseudo-royal lords is limited, so if we can kill enough of them, they won't have the capital to fight us anymore. If that's the case, it would be better for me to act alone. Mi Jingluan was momentarily taken aback before considering carefully, and then nodded. That's true. Yang Kai taking command of the Red Flame Army would undoubtedly allow it to soar like a dragon diving into the sea, leaving the Black Ink clan no room to act recklessly in front of them. However, managing an army would also be a drag on Yang Kai. If he acted alone, it would undoubtedly be more convenient. Unlike the other Ninth Order masters, Yang Kai was proficient in Tao of Space, so even if he traveled from one battlefield to the next, the amount of time spent in transit would actually be quite small. As the two conversed, the rest of the staff sat quietly to the side, listening in amazement. Among the numerous Ninth Order masters, the person in front of them was probably the only one who could laugh and treat the Black Ink clan as if they were insignificant. But everyone knew that this was not arrogance, but extreme self-confidence. Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-27 Small Gift. In the main conference hall, Mi Jingluan looked at Yang Kai with a hint of apology. I know it's been tough for you to rush around, but we don't have much time to spare. We're counting on you to take care of the Red Flame Army situation. Yang Kai chuckled. I haven't been in a fight for so many years. It's time to go and stretch my muscles. As he spoke, he stood up and walked out. When he reached the door, he suddenly threw something back that flew straight towards Mi Jingluan. Mi Jingluan caught it as he heard Yang Kai say, I brought a small gift for Senior Brother. Please accept it. By the time he looked up, Yang Kai had already disappeared. Watching Yang Kai leave, the staff members who had been anxious for a long time finally breathed a sigh of relief. Since Yang Kai had returned and was headed towards the E5 territory, it was quite likely that things there would soon be under control. On the other hand, the Black Ink clan had no idea that he had returned, and they would surely suffer a big loss once caught off guard. Supreme Commander Mi, since Sir Yang has returned, why not gather all the Ninth Order masters and directly attack the no-return pass? Someone suggested. The Black Ink clan's advantage lay not only in the number of pseudo-royal lords, but also in the steady stream of troops. As long as they had enough Black Ink nests and supplies, they could continually spawn large armies. If they attacked the no-return pass and destroyed the high-rank Black Ink nests, they could completely cut off the Black Ink clan's supply of troops. Then the pressure on the human race would be greatly reduced. Currently, the Black Ink clan army seemed endless, but without the Black Ink nests, they would eventually be eradicated completely. Roughly 500 years ago, the humans had attempted this, but at that time, there were only 4 Ninth Order masters and unfortunately, the Black Ink clan was on guard, so the attempt failed. But now, with Yang Kai's return, there were 7 Ninth Order masters in total, almost twice as many as before. If they made another attempt, there was a high chance of success. Mi Jingluan held the box tightly and shook his head. It's too risky. Even if it succeeds, We may not be able to destroy all the high-rank black ink nests. If we can't cut off the roots once and for all, this move would be meaningless and would only put all the armies at unnecessary risk. Today was different from the past. The 12 armies of the human race were all fighting far from the rear lines and from each other, and the Black Ink clan had their own countermeasures in place. If the Ninth Order Masters suddenly disappeared, the Black Ink clan would surely take advantage of the situation. Without the Ninth Order Masters assuming command, the previously evenly matched situation could strongly tilt in the Black Ink clan's favor. By that time, the human race would undoubtedly suffer countless deaths and injuries, and the previously accumulated achievements might all be lost at once. The staff member who spoke thought about it, and then nodded lightly. What Supreme Commander Me said is true. I was thinking too simply. At present, the situation of the two races is such that our human race can only steadily fight while not showing any openings to the Black Ink clan. You must all remember this, Mi Jingluan replied. Yes, everyone responded in unison. Mi Jingluan withdrew his gaze and casually opened the box that Yang Kai threw to him before leaving. Since Yang Kai said it was a small gift he had brought back, Mi Jingluan didn't give it much thought, but the moment he opened the box, his expression froze stiff. Not only him, but all the other Eighth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters in the main hall were instantly attracted to the object in the box. Lying in the box was a multicolored light pill, with a wondrous aura emanating from it that made both Mi Jingluan and the Eighth Order staff feel as if the bottlenecks that had bound them for millennia were showing signs of loosening. Although they had never seen this kind of pill before, the Eighth Order Masters who felt the abnormality at this moment recognized its origin at a glance. A supreme-grade open heaven pill. Someone exclaimed. Mi Jingluan became even more shocked as the words passed through his ears. The small gift Yang Kai brought back is actually a supreme-grade open heaven pill. He couldn't believe his eyes. But only something like the mysterious energy of such a pill could loosen the shackles of an Eighth Order Open Heaven Master. In this world, there was probably nothing else that could do this except for a supreme-grade open heaven pill. This was a priceless treasure that all peak Eighth Order Masters dreamed of. It was an opportunity to break through the shackles of the Open Heaven Realm method. This spirit pill also represented the birth of a Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Master. With Mi Jingluan's many years of accumulation and heritage, if he were to refine it, he would surely advance to the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm in short order. Instantly Mi Jingluan understood. This supreme-grade open heaven pill was probably snatched by Yang Kai from the Chaos Spirit King. Years ago, he had talked to many masters who had returned from the Universe Furnace to find out about Yang Kai's whereabouts. Some had reported feeling Yang Kai's aura from afar, but also that he disappeared quickly. It seemed that Yang Kai was being chased by the Chaos Spirit King at that time. At that time, Mi Jingluan speculated that Yang Kai had probably gone to trouble the Chaos Spirit King again, and snatched the supreme-grade open heaven pill he lost in the great battle against the Black Ink clan. However, as Yang Kai had been missing for so many years, there was no way to verify this. It wasn't until now, with the spirit pill in his hand as proof, that Mi Jingluan's guess was confirmed. Yang Kai had indeed snatched the spirit pill back. No wonder the Chaos Spirit King had been chasing after him all that time. Encountering Yang Kai was bad luck for the Chaos Spirit King, who had to fight for the spirit pill several times. Gently closing the wooden box in his hand, Mi Jingluan momentarily pondered before saying, I need to enter retreat for a while. You guys can handle things here on your own. If it's not an emergency, feel free to consult amongst yourselves. The others nodded in agreement. After that, Mi Jingluan stepped out of the main hall, holding the box tightly in his hand. At present, there were many masters at the peak of the Eighth Order Open Heaven Realm, many of whom had made great contributions to the human race on the battlefield. These individuals were commendable, having risked their lives for the greater cause. They too required supreme-grade open heaven pills to break through their current bottlenecks. However, there was only one pill. Mi Jingluan was not a selfish person. If it were peacetime, he might not have cared about the spirit pill because he was not someone who was obsessed with reaching the Ninth Order. But this was war. He was the supreme commander of the human race's 12 armies. These armies had made continuous progress over the past 600 years, reclaiming more than 200 great territories. However, with such a long and distant front line, it was no longer appropriate to have the supreme headquarters set up in this location. After all, feedback from the front lines couldn't be timely, and would often affect decision-making and responses. Mi Jingluan had also thought about relocating the supreme headquarters to a position closer to the battlefield, but he didn't dare to do so because he was only an 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, and the number of people left behind at the supreme headquarters was not enough to deal with a surprise attack if led by pseudo-royal lords or royal lords. If the Black Ink clan found the location of the supreme headquarters and launched an attack, it would be disastrous. Mi Jingluan's death alone wouldn't matter much, but if the supreme headquarters was wiped out, it would definitely affect the morale of the human race army. Without the central coordination of the supreme headquarters, the various armies would also not be able to coordinate with one another. In terms of information transmission, the humans were not as efficient and fast compared to the Black Ink clan. So, losing the supreme headquarters would be extremely detrimental to the overall situation. Mi Jingluan knew that if he could advance to the 9th Order Open Heaven Realm, all his past plans could be put into action. The supreme headquarters could be deployed towards the direction of the battlefield and receive frontline information in a more timely manner. When he saw the spirit pill, Mi Jingluan hesitated for a moment, but ultimately decided to use it to break through to the 9th Order. After Mi Jingluan left, the group of staff members gradually regained their calm, although they might never have the chance to reach the 9th Order, and the Supreme Grade Open Heaven pill would not be for them. They couldn't help but feel happy that another 9th Order Master was soon to be born in the human race. An 8th Order Master spoke in a low voice. Supreme Commander Mi's breakthrough is classified information and should not be leaked under any circumstances. Everyone nodded in agreement. The Black Ink clan now had a thorough understanding of the human race, with 6 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters leading 6 armies. Keeping in mind that they were probably unaware of Yang Kai's return, it wouldn't be long before the E5 territory plunged into a reign of terror. If Mi Jingluan were to break through to the 9th Order realm, the human race would have a total of 8 9th Order Masters, so concealing Mi Jingluan's breakthrough could potentially be used to their advantage in the future. Everyone here was smart enough to understand this. It was tacit even if Mi Jingluan did not give any orders about it. The E5 territory was a great territory with a designated code rather than a name. It had always been barren, with only a few universe worlds with martial Daos, even inferior to the star boundary before it flourished. Despite its lack of distinction, there were still quite a number of such great territories in the 3,000 worlds. When the Black Ink clan invaded the 3,000 worlds, they effortlessly took over this great territory, and the living beings on the few universe worlds here had no idea what had happened, falling victim to the disaster. After capturing this great territory, the Black Ink clan did not leave too many forces here, as neither they nor the human race paid much attention to such a great territory. However, 10 years ago, the E5 territory had become the battlefield where the Red Flame Army and the Black Ink clan fought. As Mi Jingluan said, over the years, the Black Ink clan had intentionally and unintentionally abandoned more than 200 great territories, forcing the humans to extend their battle lines, which gave them a chance to strike at the Red Flame Army. Retreating at the right time would not be considered a failure, but rather, a forward-thinking plan to make for a better counterattack. Under the leadership of Mo Na Yi, despite losing many great territories and some troops, the Black Ink clan's top combat power was well preserved. The string of losses had caused the Black Ink clan's anger to boil for hundreds of years, and once this kind of anger erupted, it would be unstoppable. As long as they could defeat the Red Flame Army, the Black Ink clan's years of forbearance would be worthwhile. That was why Black Ink clan was determined to win this war. The reason why they chose the Red Flame Army was because it did not have a 9th Order Master leading it, making them easier to deal with. There were only a few 9th Order Masters, but the humans were divided into 12 armies, making it impossible for each one to have a 9th Order Master. Martial Peak, Chapter 58-28 E5 Territory. In the E5 territory, A massive battle was in full swing. More than a decade ago, the Red Flame Army had been on a winning streak, liberating numerous great territories one after another, until they advanced into the E5 territory where the Black Ink clan had long made their preparations, resulting in the two great armies engaging in a fierce struggle in the vast and boundless void. Over the last 10 years, large-scale battles occurred regularly, with both sides suffering losses each time. Despite the Red Flame Army's overwhelming momentum, they could no longer easily recapture this territory as they had done with so many before. After hundreds of years of retreating, the Black Ink clan army finally displayed an unimaginable fighting spirit and resilience. For the first time in hundreds of years, they began to push back against the Red Flame Army, holding them at bay. In addition, the continuous involvement of many pseudo-royal lords put enormous pressure on the Red Flame Army's masters. The pseudo-royal lords were almost equivalent to royal lords and Ninth Order masters, beings no lone Eighth Order master was a match for. At the very least, they needed to form a 5 elements or even a 6 paths formation to contend with a pseudo-royal lord head-on. And there were a total of almost 20 pseudo-royal lords in the E5 territory. This was a terrifying number as there would not be this many pseudo-royal lords participating at the other fronts in the war, unless there was a Ninth Order master present. The Black Ink clan's intentions were clear. They intended to use these pseudo-royal lords to deliver a crushing blow to the Red Flame Army to serve as a warning to all other human race masters. Though faced with such a strong opponent, the Red Flame Army demonstrated remarkable determination. In each battle, many Eighth Order masters gave their all, sacrificing their blood, and even their lives in those battles against the pseudo-royal lords. Countless were those who had burnt out and faded away. They did all of this for only one purpose, to weaken the strength of these pseudo-royal lords, even if they couldn't kill them. The Black Ink clan took advantage of the large number of innate territory lords who had escaped from the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, to create a large number of pseudo-royal lords, which was an advantage that the humans could not match for the time being. However, the Black Ink clan had a weakness that was difficult to resolve. Once they were injured, it was hard to restore themselves. The injuries were not severe at first, as the pseudo-royal lords were strong, so it hardly affected them. However, once the injuries became serious, their strength would greatly decline, which also meant they had to enter a Black Ink nest to restore themselves. With each sacrifice made by the many Eighth Order masters, the injuries of the pseudo-royal lords accumulated, forcing them to leave the battlefield and return to the no-return pass to heal. If it weren't for the continuous dispatch of new pseudo-royal lords from the no-return pass to assist in the battle in E5 territory, the war would not have been so fierce and the Red Flame Army might even have had a good chance of defeating the enemy. However, all of this was at the cost of a large number of Eighth Order masters dying. Furthermore, to balance the power gap between the various armies, the Supreme Headquarters intentionally transferred divine spirits to the armies without Ninth Order masters leading them. The Red Flame Army was no exception. Although they didn't have many divine spirits, there were more than 30 with them. Even the ancient dragon elders of the Dragon Clan, the Phoenixes, and other divine spirits were here with them, lending their aid. These divine spirits had lived for countless years, and were undoubtedly stronger than the average Eighth Order master. Although there was still a power gap between them and the pseudo-royal lords, their unique innate divine abilities made up for this to a large extent. Often, just 2 or 3 divine spirits working together could compete with a pseudo-royal lord. It was precisely because of these factors that the Red Flame Army had been able to persist. The situation was still very unfavorable, though, as the Black Ink clan had targeted the Red Flame Army as their primary enemy. Naturally, they would not let the Red Flame Army off so easily. In recent years, the Black Ink clan had continuously increased their military forces, putting tremendous pressure on all parts of the Red Flame Army. Any astute person could see that the war in E5 territory would ultimately end with the defeat of the Red Flame Army. The human race masters wanted to kill masters from the Black Ink clan, but wasn't it the same for the Black Ink clan? There were still many pseudo-royal lords waiting in the no-return pass, ready to enter the battlefield at any time. If Mo Na Yi were to throw caution to the wind and dispatch all the pseudo-royal lords, the Red Flame Army would have no way to fight back. The reason he didn't do so was to slowly grind down the human's strength like a blunt knife cutting meat. Although the pseudo-royal lords had suffered serious injuries over the past decade, not a single one died, while countless Eighth Order masters had. But even if the humans knew this, what could they do? The Red Flame Army could not retreat, so all they could do was grit their teeth and persist. Seeking external assistance was also impossible as all the other armies were dealing with their own opponents, and no one had spare power to lend. If it had been a few hundred years ago, when the human race was only defending the dozen or so original Great Territory battlefields, they could have requested reinforcements from nearby Great Territories. Because at that time, the distance between the various battlefields was not too great, so they could quickly go help and then withdraw. But now, with the human race's battle lines stretched out so thin, while the various armies were certainly coordinating their operations, it was difficult to form a situation where they could support each other. Monaye's plan finally came to fruition, and the constant retreat of the Black Ink clan proved that it was not all for naught. In the void, a standard warship charged forward, surrounded by countless low-rank Black Ink clansmen, who were nothing more than cannon fodder. Although there were occasional high-rank Black Ink clansmen, they posed no significant threat. However, in the vast void, this warship was always at risk of being destroyed, as the number of Black Ink clan soldiers was simply too great to defeat. To make matters worse, there were also several feudal lords hiding and striking from the shadows when they saw openings. Trapped here were 11 soldiers from the Red Flame Army 4th Division, led by squad leader Wang Qian and vice squad leader Zhao Li. Only one other member was a 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, while the rest were only of the 5th Order or 6th Order. Although the human race now had the Star Boundary and the Myriad Monsters world as Open Heaven Realm cradles, not everyone possessed remarkable aptitude. Most had an average talent. Only those highly talented ones received a lot of attention. Furthermore, even geniuses required time to grow and ascend step by step from lower orders to higher ones. Therefore, the majority of the large armies of the human race were still made up of 5th Order and 6th Order masters. However, the average cultivation among the human race masters had increased by at least 1 or 2 orders compared to several thousand years ago. On the Black Ink battlefield, having only one 7th Order master per squad as its squad leader was normal. While there was not a shortage of 7th Order masters, there were not too many of them either. Only those who had reached the 7th Order were eligible for the role of squad leader. But this particular squad was unique as it had not 1 or 2, but 3 7th Order masters, highlighting the general growth of power. In the Red Flame Army, such squad compositions were considered standard, and it could be said that it was rare for a squad to have just one 7th Order master in this army. Currently, some elite squads even had squad leaders who were 8th Order masters. The number of 8th Order masters among the human race was now quite significant. This was not only due to the accumulation over the years, but also because of a surge in 8th Order masters thanks to the ordinary grade Open Heaven pills harvested from the Universe Furnace. The overall increase in average cultivation also greatly enhanced the strength of various human race armies. Even so, Wang Qian's squad was currently in a tricky situation. During a previous large-scale clash with the Black Ink clan army, they got separated from their division. This was not uncommon during clashes between the two armies as soldiers could easily get lost in the vast and boundless battlefield. Normally in such situations, the aim was to return quickly to one's division and reunite with one's comrades. Otherwise, being left stranded could make one an easy target for the enemy. Wang Qian also wanted to lead his squad back to their division, but they had the misfortune of encountering a group of the Black Ink clansmen along the way, forcing them to fight and flee. With the Black Ink clan's overwhelming numbers, the situation for the squad became even more precarious. The 3 7th Order Open Heaven Masters took up positions on different sides of the warship, and continually unleashed the power of their secret techniques and artifacts, blasting away at the Black Ink clan soldiers. Suddenly, a cry rang out from the 6th Order Master responsible, "Squad leader, the defensive array is about to collapse. We can't hold on much longer." Another team member shouted, "The Tiger Roar cannon is overheating. We can only use it 3 more times at most." The Tiger Roar cannon was the primary offensive artifact of their warship. and every standard squad-class warship was equipped with one. When combined with prearranged arrays, 3 6th-order masters could infuse their power into the artifact to unleash an attack equivalent to a 7th-order master's full power strike. However, artifacts and arrays were ultimately lifeless objects, and using them too frequently in a short period could easily exceed their limits. The warship's primary armament was about to overload, and the defensive shields were on the verge of collapse. For the entire squad, this was adding insult to injury, as the former would greatly reduce the squad's might, and the latter would directly decide the safety of the squad members. Squad leader Wang Qian shouted angrily while fighting the enemy, "Zhong Wuyu! Don't shout, I'm already working on it," came the response quickly from the warship. He was the last 3rd 7th-order master of the squad. In a hurry, he ran to the Tiger Roar cannon and inspected the artifact. He then quickly took out some supplies and activated his power to repair it. Zhong Wuyu was not only a 7th-order master, but also an artifact refiner. He was no grandmaster, or even a great master, but generally, small damage to the warship did not need to be sent to the logistics department for repair, as he could patch it himself. On the other side, Vice Squad leader Zhao Li had a face painted with fresh blood, looking quite disheveled. He had just charged out into the enemy's lines and killed a lot of them, easing the pressure on the squad. But he had also been injured and was now cursing out loud, "That damn me Jinglu! Are we the Red Flame Army, their forgotten stepchildren? Why don't we have 9th-order masters leading us like the Soaring Cloud Army or Purple Feather Army?" As the saying went, unequal distribution of resources is worse than scarcity. Currently, there were 6 9th-order masters among the human race, but there were a total of 12 frontline armies. In the beginning, Luoting he was in charge of Azure Sun territory and managed the Azure Sun army. Similarly, Wei Junyang managed the Wolf Fang army, so it was understandable that these two armies could have 9th-order masters leading them. At most, it made people a little envious, but no one would say anything about it. Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-29, Bloody Battle. After the Universe Furnace closed, Ouyang Lai and Xiang Shan returned as 9th-order masters, and took over the Profound Nether Army and Blood Flame armies respectively. No one said anything about it since they had entered the Universe Furnace from Profound Nether territory and Blood Flame territory previously. It could only be said that Profound Nether and Blood Flame had been lucky. The Red Flame Army also had many 8th-order masters entering the Universe Furnace at that time, but they were unable to ascend to the 9th Order. When Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing were freed, all the armies watched them expectantly, hoping that these 2 9th Order masters would lead them to strengthen their forces. However, there were only 2 9th Order masters and 8 armies hoping to get them. In the end, it was decided by the Supreme Headquarters that Xiao Xiao would lead the Soaring Cloud Army and Wu Qing would lead the Purple Feather Army. Some had considered consolidating the 12 armies into 6, in which case 6 9th Order masters would be enough, but currently, each army had a massive number of troops. If 2 were to be combined, the number of troops would increase drastically, making it difficult to manage and coordinate. Furthermore, there would be more 9th Order masters in the future. Did they have to split the armies once again when that happened? With these considerations, the Supreme Headquarters decided to maintain the status quo of having 12 armies. However, half of them would not have a 9th Order master in command, so the Supreme Headquarters could only send divine spirits to provide assistance and maintain the balance. Upon hearing Zhao Li's complaints, Wang Qian could not help but scold. The Supreme Headquarters also has its own difficulties. What are you complaining about? I know, though Zhao Li was hot-tempered, he was not ignorant of the situation. He wouldn't usually bring up such issues, but the situation was dire, and they were likely to perish soon. When a person was about to die, they couldn't care less about anything else. If you have the ability, then you ascend to the 9th Order yourself and take charge of the Red Flame Army. Wang Qian cursed. Upon hearing that, Zhao Li became furious. Ascend my ass. I will reach my limit at the 8th Order in this life. What's more, those bastards in the logistics department. I wanted to use my military merits to exchange for materials to upgrade the warship, but they refused. My military merits are hard-earned. Why can't I upgrade my warship? If I had done so earlier, would we have fallen into this situation? I won't let those bastards off the hook even after I die. Wang Qian remained silent and focused on killing the enemy. Their warship was produced by the artifact refiners from the logistics department and was the standard model that 99% of squads used. Even if it was a generic warship, each one cost a lot of resources to refine. In earlier years, soldiers were not prohibited from using their military merits to exchange for materials to modify their warships. Since military merits were earned at the cost of their lives, there were no restrictions on how they could use them. As a result, many preferred to upgrade their warships, believing that a well-equipped warship would not only help them survive on the battlefield, but also increase their chances of killing enemies. Millennia ago, when Yang Kai led Dawn on the Black Ink battlefield, their warship Dawning Light was heavily modified at the cost of a vast amount of military merits. Yang Kai invested most of his military merits in Dawning Light, greatly enhancing its various capabilities and allowing the Dawn Squad to thrive in numerous bloody battles. However, in recent years, soldiers were no longer allowed to modify their warships in that manner. The higher-ups were not ignorant of the benefits of modifying warships, but now that the human race faced a scarcity of resources, each resource had to be carefully accounted for and allocated. How could there be any extra resources to give to troops for modifying their warships? Only some elite squads, through a lengthy application process, could exchange military merits for resources to modify their warships. Even then, the number of military merits required was far more than before. At this moment, it was unreasonable for Zhao Li to curse the logistics department, as they were only executing orders from the higher-ups. However, with everyone facing harsh circumstances and potential death, venting his anger by cursing was understandable. Squad leader, the defensive array is about to collapse. A squad member shouted. Wang Qian looked up and saw the shield surrounding their warship had already dimmed and was on the verge of cracking. Taking a deep breath, he shouted, "Prepare for a final fight. Xiao Wu, activate the self-destruct array of the warship. Set it for 10 breaths." "Yes," responded the Fifth Order Master, who had been called out. Even if they had to die, they would kill as many enemies as possible. On the other hand, Zhong Wuyu, who had been repairing the Tiger Roar cannon, stopped. There was no point in wasting any more time. He took out his sword and leapt to stand shoulder to shoulder with Wang Qian, staring resolutely at the densely packed Black Ink clansmen surrounding them. One by one, the squad members summoned their artifacts and gathered around Wang Qian. Their momentum was soaring, and their aura was surging as they formed their battle formations. Even facing thousands of enemies, they advanced fearlessly. They would fight to the bitter end. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the enemy army. In the next moment, Wang Qian and others' faces changed slightly as they sensed a vast number of auras disappearing in the surrounding area, as if an endless number of Black Ink clansmen had died in an instant. But due to the overwhelming numbers of Black Ink clansmen surrounding the warship, they were unable to see what was happening beyond them, leaving them bewildered. Just as they were in a state of confusion, they suddenly noticed ripples in the void ahead of them. As the ripples passed through, space shook and then shattered, causing countless void cracks to spread out like a school of fish swimming over them. The countless void cracks almost enveloped all of the Black Ink clansmen, yet somehow avoided where their warship was located, which fortunately remained unscathed. In the next instant, the Black Ink clan army that had cornered them, regardless of their strength or location, all spewed out black blood as they were sliced into pieces by the void cracks. Many of them died with bewildered expressions on their faces, not understanding what just happened. Wang Qian was stunned by the scene. Although he still didn't know exactly what had happened, the only thing he could understand was that a powerful allied master had intervened and instantly killed those Black Ink clansmen. What incredible power! He didn't even notice any energy fluctuations, just a layer of ripples, followed by the formation of void cracks that enveloped all of the Black Ink clansmen surrounding their warship, including the feudal lords who had been hiding nearby. The next moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the sea of corpses and blood. That figure locked eyes with Wang Qian, and said nothing before nodding lightly as he confirmed that they were safe. Then he took a step forward and disappeared. Xiaowu! Wang Qian suddenly snapped out of his trance, turned his head and shouted, "Stop!" He had just given this squad member the command to activate the self-destruct array after 10 breaths, and he didn't know if he could stop it now. At a glance, Wang Qian breathed a sigh of relief, as Xiaowu seemed to have been stunned by what just happened, and was standing there motionless. Squad leader? Who was that? The division commander? After a moment of silence, one of the team members spoke up and asked, "Division commander?" Zhong Wuyu turned his head and glanced at the person, snorting softly. Division commanders don't have that kind of power. What they just witnessed was not something an 8th Order division commander could accomplish. How could they possibly annihilate such a large number of Black Ink clansmen in an instant, including several powerful feudal lords? Although an 8th Order master could indeed destroy such an enemy force, it would not have been this swift and effortless. Not an 8th Order master? The person who spoke was stunned for a moment, then exclaimed in shock, "Could it be? It's Senior Yang." Zhao Li's eyes shone brightly. Although Yang Kai had only appeared for a moment, Zhao Li recognized him. Zhao Li had always regarded Senior Yang as his goal to strive for. Previously, he ascended straight to the 6th Order, so the 8th Order realm was the limit of his life, and the 9th Order was out of his reach. However, Senior Yang directly ascended to the 5th Order in the past, and was now in the 9th Order Open Heaven realm, giving many people like Zhao Li hope that he might just still be able to grow to that height one day. Therefore, Zhao Li had done a lot of research on Yang Kai and even personally went to High Heaven Palace to pay homage to his statue. Not only Zhao Li, but Wang Qian also recognized Yang Kai, and was full of excitement. He muttered to himself, "Wasn't Senior Yang trapped in the universe furnace?" It wasn't a secret that Yang Kai was trapped in the universe furnace. Anyone who paid attention to him knew about it. How could he disappear for hundreds of years if he wasn't trapped there? So Wang Qian couldn't figure out how Yang Kai appeared there. Zhao Li chuckled and said, "For that senior, being trapped in the universe furnace is nothing. He must have found a way out on his own." Zhong Wuyu nodded and continued, "Heroes arise in troubled times. With Senior's return, the Black Ink clan is in deep trouble. In any case, we owe him a lot this time. We would have been doomed without his intervention." Everyone nodded in agreement. "Haven't you guys thought of something else?" Zhao Li smiled. "What else?" "Senior's appearance here means that the Red Flame Army now also has a 9th Order master leading us." Only then did everyone realize this. The Red Flame Army had always hoped to have their own 9th Order master leading them, like the other 6 armies. Unfortunately, there were only so many 9th Order masters around, so how could their wish come true? Now that Yang Kai had appeared in E5 territory, did it not mean that the Red Flame Army would have a 9th Order master assuming command as well? Their long-cherished wish was finally about to come true. For a moment, everyone became ecstatic. After being uplifted, Wang Qian quickly gave orders, and the warship swept in an arc towards the direction of their division. At the same time, Yang Kai's figure flickered and moved rapidly towards the vast battlefield in the void. Setting out from Supreme Headquarters, he had been hurrying all the way and arrived at E5 territory in less than half a month. After ascending to the 9th Order, his control over space principles had become more proficient, making his travel time shorter than before. If it was before, it would have taken at least a month or two to travel such a distance. When he encountered Wang Qian's squad being besieged on the way, he casually rescued them. For him, it was not a big deal, but he didn't expect that Wang Qian's squad would have some misunderstandings after he showed up. The intense main battlefield was in sight, and Yang Kai used Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to conceal his figure and aura. For over 600 years, there had been no news of him. Not only did the human race think he was trapped in the universe furnace, but so did the Black Ink clan. Not even Mo Na Yi could imagine that he would suddenly appear at this moment. Since that was the case, then he would announce his return with a giant slaughter. Marshall Peak. Chapter 5830, Operation Jade. Amid the vast void, the massive armies of both the humans and the Black Ink clan were engaged in a bloody fight. Warships flew about as secret techniques and divine abilities were shot in all directions. Between the unleashing of evil purging divine spears and the spread of the black ink clouds across the void, countless lives were constantly lost in the chaos of the battlefield. One warship could no longer hold up against the Black Ink clan's fervent attacks. The defensive array shattered, and breaths before the warship was annihilated, numerous silhouettes shot out into the enemy lines with the determination to go out fighting. Wherever the Black Ink clan gathered, the human race masters made sure to target the area with the strength of their artifacts, and they managed to carve large swaths into the enemy lines. Ever since the Red Flame Army started sieging E5 territory, brutal battles had broken out countless times. The fighting was most intense on the main battlefield, but outside the main battlefield, many other areas had been turned into smaller battlefields too. This was a feverish battle between the masters from both sides. The Eighth Order Masters, the Divine Spirits, the Territory Lords and the Pseudo-Royal Lords were clashing across the many smaller battlefields as well. Now and then, dragon roars and phoenix cries echoed across the void, the strong, sonorous roars reaching the ears of both allies and enemies alike, shaking the hearts of all. The death toll soared on every single battlefield. The Red Flame Army did not have a Ninth Order Master assuming command, so to face off against the Pseudo-Royal Lords, the Eighth Order Masters had to use battle formations. Most of the time, a single Pseudo-Royal Lord was able to keep 5 or 6 Eighth Order Masters occupied. Even the Divine Spirits formed groups of 2s and 3s to deal with the Pseudo-Royal Lords. Fortunately, the humans had benefited greatly from the Universe Furnace. Many new Eighth Order Masters had emerged over the years already, and the ordinary grade open heaven pills that the humans brought out from the Universe Furnace led to the birth of even more Eighth Order Masters. Had that not been the case, the number of Eighth Order Masters in the Red Flame Army would not have sufficed for them to keep the enemy at bay. Many factors went into deciding the victory of a battle as significant as this. Although the fight had been going on for quite some time now, both parties were still at a stalemate. On some of the battlefields, the humans had the advantage, but on others, the Black Ink clan were in a better position. Achieving victory would depend on which side was able to make the most of their advantage, and widen the gap to eventually make it snowball into a decisive win. But for the time being, both the human race and the Black Ink clan lacked the means to enable them to achieve such an effect. For the past decade, the Red Flame Army had fought similarly intense battles with the enemy numerous times, but they were never able to gain a decisive edge, though they were never on the losing end of the fight either. All in all, the situation remained a stalemate between both sides. However, as time passed and the number of battles increased, the situation began to look bad for the humans. This was because the Pseudo-Royal Lords that the Red Flame Army were up against were far too decisive and ruthless. The Black Ink clan's large numbers of Pseudo-Royal Lords imposed a heavy burden on the Red Flame Army. None of the Eighth Order Masters or the Divine Spirits could face off against the Pseudo-Royal Lords alone after all. Yet, the Black Ink clan had sent nearly 20 Pseudo-Royal Lords to E5 territory, which ended up occupying a sizable portion of the Red Flame Army's top combat power. To hold their ground, the Eighth Order Masters fought valiantly with no regard for their lives as they confronted the Pseudo-Royal Lords. They figured that even if they could not kill the Pseudo-Royal Lords, they were still going to do their best to injure them. As long as the injuries kept mounting, they would have a chance to kill the Pseudo-Royal Lords. Therefore, though the Pseudo-Royal Lords were injured time and time again, many of the Eighth Order Masters had been sacrificed as well. In the last 10 years, nearly 200 Eighth Order Masters had died at the hands of these Pseudo-Royal Lords, but right up till their deaths, these Eighth Order Masters had given their all to inflict wounds that would make it hard for their enemies to recover. 200 Eighth Order Masters was not a number that could be overlooked. Back on the Black Ink battlefield, no great pass would even have 100 Eighth Order Masters in total. The humans were only able to withstand such heavy losses because their heritage had strengthened and more Eighth Order Masters kept rising. While the humans used this method to fight against the Pseudo-Royal Lords, the Black Ink clan's strategy to counter them was just as simple. They sent the Pseudo-Royal Lords who were too injured to fight back to no return pass to recuperate, and deployed unscathed ones to join the battle. This meant that the Pseudo-Royal Lords the Red Flame Army was dealing with had changed throughout the last 10 years. Though the total number on the field remained the same, there was still a large group of pseudo-royal lords hanging around at the no-return pass. That being said, Mo Na Yi did not send all of them out. Firstly, it was because there had to be masters standing guard at no-return pass, and secondly, it was feeding into the strategy he had in mind. This was the best way to consistently deplete the human race's strength. In this way, Mo Na Yi actually shared Mi Jingluan's stance. The current battle between the human race and the Black Ink clan was not for the sake of claiming great territories for themselves, but to weaken the enemy's forces. The fact that both parties had the same idea led to the devastating battle at E5 territory. Aboard a purifying Black Ink battleship in the Red Flame Eastern Army's possession, the Eastern Army commander Wuxia Hua was going through the reports he received from the battlefield and giving out orders as needed. His expression was grave, and the atmosphere inside the warship was tense as well. The humans' 12 armies had all fought against the Black Ink clan on the Great Territory battlefields for thousands of years, so without enough Ninth Order masters available, armies were still under the command of experienced Eighth Order masters like Wuxia Hua. All 12 armies had massive numbers, so it was hard for an Eighth Order master to take control over the entire situation alone. Thus, the armies mimicked the system of the Great Passes of the past, splitting into Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern armies which formed a single Grand Army when combined. Naturally, each army had a master leading them. Doing so made things a little more complicated as the 4 army commanders would have disagreements along the way, but there was no other choice. Without a Ninth Order master to take the lead, the humans had to rely on the veteran Eighth Order master's battle experience and perceptiveness to make appropriate arrangements. Thankfully, they had spent several millennia getting into the right mindset, and the 4 army commanders of the Red Flame Army had formed an impossibly close relationship. They were able to work as one to command the entire army smoothly. Their rapport and mutual understanding after so many years of working together enabled the Red Flame Army to display their maximum strength at all times, and fend off the Black Ink clan's attacks time and time again. The Black Ink clan failed to gain any upper hand in their fights so far. Out on the battlefield, things could change at any moment. Amid the intense fighting, everyone was focused on their immediate vicinity, and it was difficult for them to pay attention to the situation happening elsewhere. Thus, it was easy to get into the situation of having great success on one battlefield while losing miserably on another. Masters could break through the enemy lines and slaughter their troops or suddenly be under siege, and in need of rescue with little to no warning. The Red Flame Army's masters were only able to maintain an equilibrium across all the fights because the commanders kept moving them around as necessary. Inside the purifying Black Ink battleship, Wuxia Hua had only just given out an order when the observer who was keeping an eye on the situation out on the battlefields called out in alarm. "Sir, a group of Black Ink clan members have broken through the lines and are charging straight at us. They're coming over now with 2 pseudo-royal lords in the lead." He checked the monitoring array, and was able to quickly confirm their identities. His voice trembled as he exclaimed, "It's Jiang Qi and Hu Yu." Wuxia Hua's eyes flashed as he scoffed. "Here I was wondering why they'd gone into hiding. So this is what they were up to." After clashing all these years, the Red Flame Army knew full well who the pseudo-royal lords they were facing were. Although the pseudo-royal lords were rotated in and out a lot more than the territory lords, there were a few pseudo-royal lords that the Red Flame Army considered their biggest threats. Jiang Qi and Hu Yu were 2 such pseudo-royal lords. Though they were not necessarily stronger than other pseudo-royal lords, they were more cunning and harder to anticipate. The Eastern Army had fought against these 2 pseudo-royal lords many times. The Eighth Order masters had formed battle formations to try and injure the 2 of them, but they never succeeded, and a few Eighth Order masters had been sacrificed along the way. Ever since the start of the current battle, the Eastern Army had paid close attention to the pseudo-royal lords' movements, but they never found any trace of these 2. Thus, Wuxia Hua, who was in command here, was not surprised that they showed up now. The fact that they were charging over so openly made it clear what the 2 pseudo-royal lords' goal was. They wanted to defeat the enemy by slaughtering the leader first. As long as they killed Wuxia Hua, the Eastern Army would be left without a commander. Even though someone else could take over the task of giving out orders to the Eastern Army, that would take time to organize, and would leave an opening to strike at. Thus, the Black Ink clan would have the chance to overwhelm the Eastern Army. The Black Ink clan's determination was seen from the fact that they were sending 2 pseudo-royal lords to accomplish this goal. Furthermore, they also brought a large group of territory lords with them. As the Black Ink clan assault team surged forward, the Eighth Order Masters moved to intercept them, but the 2 pseudo-royal lords did not even bother to look at the humans. Instead, the territory lords broke off to keep these Eighth Order Masters occupied. Black Ink's strength kept spreading out wherever they went. And with the strength of the many Black Ink clan members, they were able to clear a bloody path through the human army and charge towards the purifying Black Ink battleship. "We can't hold them back, sir." The master who was reporting on the situation cried out in alarm. With the way things were going, their enemies would soon be able to fly right up to them. And when that happened, everyone inside the purifying Black Ink battleship would meet a disastrous fate. Zuoqiu Yanghua eyed the 2 figures in the distance with a cold gaze. Despite not being their equal in terms of combat strength, he showed no sign of wavering as he commanded, "Execute Operation Jade." His voice was steely and left no room for objections. Everyone was shocked, and some wanted to advise against it, but they could not bring themselves to do so. They had been under Zuoqiu Yanghua's leadership for many years now as they fought against the Black Ink clan all this time. They had killed countless enemies and received immeasurable glory. They had a deep reverence for Zuoqiu Yanghua and knew what kind of person the Eastern Army commander was. Thus, once he gave the command, all of the masters inside the purifying Black Ink battleship jumped into action. Human silhouettes whizzed about as the other warships began breaking off from the massive purifying Black Ink battleship and flying off into the distance. Meanwhile, Zuoqiu Yanghua and a few other Eighth Order Masters stayed behind. Not only did they not leave, but they even began flaring their auras. It was obvious what they were doing. "I'm right here." When the 2 pseudo-royal lords who were charging over saw the warships leaving the purifying Black Ink battleship and flying off with many human race masters on board, they thought that Zuoqiu Yanghua had fled. However, when they sensed his aura, they no longer had that worry. In fact, they chuckled to themselves. Is he trying to let his subordinates escape because he knows he's doomed to die? They did not mind. Their goal was to kill Zuoqiu Yanghua. Once they killed the army commander here, they were confident that the Black Ink clan would be able to slaughter the entire Red Flame Eastern Army before swallowing up the rest of the 3 armies. By doing so, they could deal a catastrophic blow to the humans. Martial Peak. Chapter 5831 Explosion. Zuoqiu Yanghua came from Profound Sword Paradise and entered the Black Ink battlefield when he was a 6th Order Master. After spending over 10,000 years serving at Profound Sword Pass, he went from being a 6th Order Master to an 8th Order Master, and also exhibited a talent in strategy and command that surpassed his peers. When the Profound Sword Pass was still in existence, he served as Eastern Army Commander. Later on, the human crusade to the primordial heavens source grand restriction ended in defeat, and the army was forced to retreat. Profound Sword Pass had stayed back to delay the enemy, but the Black Ink giant spirit god attacked them viciously. In the end, Profound Sword Paradise's 9th Order old ancestor died in that battle. Zuoqiu Yanghua had been fortunate enough to escape with his life. With the help of others, he was able to stay alive and retreat to No Return Pass. Later on, the No Return Pass had been lost as well, and war broke out in the barren territory as the Black Ink clan invaded the 3,000 worlds. Thus, Zuoqiu Yanghua could be considered an extremely experienced 8th Order Master. Not many 8th Order Masters had a longer service record than him. No one could object to him being in charge of the Red Flame Army's Eastern Army, and by default the army commander of the entire Red Flame Army. Throughout all these years, he did not let the human race down. Under his leadership, the Red Flame Army had slaughtered countless enemies and gained a massive amount of military merits. However, now that 2 pseudo-royal lords had their eyes on him, he knew he would not be getting lucky this time. The many millennia of fighting had made him intimately familiar with matters of life and death. Thus, now that his predestined time was upon him, he was neither fearful nor frantic. His heart was at peace, though he did have some regrets. After all, he had spent nearly all of his life engaged in the war against the Black Ink clan, but he would not have the chance to witness the human race's ultimate victory. It was not to say that he did not see this day coming. As an army commander, he had already planned for a situation such as this beforehand. He knew that sooner or later, the Black Ink clan would rely on the strength of their pseudo-royal lords to execute the strategy they were currently using, so he prepared for it in advance. Operation Jade was the counter he created for such a situation. If a powerful enemy came to strike him down, and he had no chance of victory, he was going to take them down with him. The pseudo-royal lords were picking up speed and closing the distance as a powerful aura locked onto Wuxia. As he stood unmoving, he declared, "Brothers, sister, it has been my honor to fight shoulder to shoulder with you today. After today, we will join hands and conquer the afterlife next." One of the Eighth Order masters chuckled. "That's the way it should be. It's a shame we won't be around to witness the end of this war," another one remarked. Another voice rang out saying, "The time to kill has come." The Eighth Order masters who remained behind had known from the start that they were most likely headed for their doom. But none of them felt any fear. On the contrary, when faced with such enormous pressure, their thirst for battle intensified. Zuoqiuhua's typically calm face broke out into a wide grin as he exclaimed, "In that case, charge." As he spoke, the Eighth Order masters channeled their world force into the arrays, and in the very next breath, the massive purifying Black Ink battleship which had been quietly floating shook before shooting forward in a flash. The two pseudo-royal lords who were charging over had been completely calm at first, but they were startled when they saw what was happening. Though they knew full well just how stubborn and full of resolve the humans were, they were taken aback by such an aggressive response despite the obvious power differential. Hu, the larger of the two with a pair of wings growing out behind him, coldly snorted. Overconfidence. He had seen similar situations many times. When confronted with a significant disparity in power, the humans would usually react more aggressively, though that choice tended to be driven by unrealistic fantasies. If he was still merely an innate territory lord, he would have to dodge situations like these. However, ever since he became a pseudo-royal lord, there were few human race masters that required him to proceed with caution. Jiangqi, who was charging along beside him, warned, "Don't let your guard down." Despite saying so, they did not slow their pace. They had brought some territory lords along with them, but they had all stopped to block the Eighth Order masters who came to intercept them. So right now, it was just the two pseudo-royal lords who were fearlessly rushing straight towards the purifying Black Ink battleship with nothing but their mighty power to back them up. From a distance, the large artifacts that had been installed into the purifying Black Ink battleship began unleashing their power under the control of the remaining Eighth Order masters. However, these artifacts were only standard issue, so even though they were strengthened by spirit arrays and powered by Eighth Order masters, it was hard for these attacks to wound the two pseudo-royal lords. The two pseudo-royal lords dodged or deflected the formidable attacks as they drew nearer to the purifying Black Ink battleship. Once the gap had shrunk to a critical point, Jiangqi and Hu both unleashed their powers at the same time. A wave of intense Black Ink strength coursed through the void towards the purifying Black Ink battleship. A dazzling light barrier lit up and shielded the purifying Black Ink battleship as Zuoqiuhua and the others used the defensive array to block the attacks. The never-ending stream of Black Ink strength kept colliding against the defensive array, making it ripple violently. The defensive array was under constant strain, and its light quickly faded. Before the pseudo-royal lords entered close quarters, the powerful shield had already been breached. This was not because the purifying Black Ink battleship's defensive array was weak by any means. However, there were not enough masters on board the purifying Black Ink battleship right now. Only a pair of Eighth Order masters were maintaining the array, so it was hard for it to display its full strength. If there had been sufficient masters to keep the purifying Black Ink battleship's defensive array up, then even though it would not be able to withstand the relentless attacks from two pseudo-royal lords for long, it would not have broken this quickly either. Without the protection of the defensive array, the purifying Black Ink battleship was akin to a human who had been stripped naked of all defenses and stood unprotected in front of two menacing pseudo-royal lords. As the overwhelming attacks rained down on the purifying black ink battleship, its bow shattered and many artifacts were destroyed. The remaining Eighth Order masters had no choice but to assume battle formations to defend themselves, but with only a handful of Eighth Order masters, it wasn't enough to fend off two pseudo-royal lords. Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others were caught in a hopeless situation. Jiang Qi and Hu Yu grinned as they lunged towards the humans. Just then, Zhuqiu Yanghua's gaze hardened. He was squeezing an array jade in his hand as he channeled a huge amount of energy into it. In the next instant, the tattered purifying black ink battleship broke apart, and the Eighth Order masters could barely keep their formation as a shockwave burst forth. The taunting looks on the two approaching pseudo-royal lords' faces had disappeared, only to be replaced by alarm and terror. Jiang Qi's eyes grew large while Hu Yu's expression rapidly shifted. As the purifying black ink battleship exploded, a pure, dazzling white light burst into existence. It was as if a great sun had exploded, and its light scattered across the enormous void. Purifying light. Jiang Qi snarled, not hesitating for even a moment as both he and Hu Yu swiftly retreated. This was the exact moment Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others were waiting for, so they were not about to let the pseudo-royal lords back away so easily. They were still in their battle formation and began casting secret techniques towards Jiang Qi. These secret techniques were not particularly damaging, but they had one thing in common, which was the ability to restrain one's opponent. The Eighth Order masters did not think they would truly be able to pin down a powerful pseudo-royal lord. Their goal was only to delay him as long as possible. Their efforts paid off. Due to the effects of the secret techniques, Jiang Qi's figure grew sluggish, and the burst of purifying light was able to engulf him. At the very next moment, Jiang Qi's furious, anguished cries escaped from the depths of the dazzling white light. Hu Yu was more fortunate as Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others did not target him, but even so he still suffered during the explosion of purifying light too. Although he had only been surrounded by the light for a brief moment, he was still in agony as he felt as if his body was on fire. Once he stumbled out of the area that was covered in purifying light, he turned back with a look of lingering fear. The Black Ink clan naturally knew about the large amounts of purifying light that were sealed inside the purifying black ink battleships. Over the years, many humans had fallen into the hands of the Black Ink clan, and were turned into Black Ink disciples. Thus, the Black Ink clan had a fairly good understanding of their enemy. The humans also had artifacts known as evil purging divine spears that contained purifying light, and were used to defeat powerful Black Ink clansmen. However, the humans had never used the purifying light inside a purifying Black Ink battleship to directly attack the Black Ink clan before. Therefore, the latter had no idea that the humans could utilize such a strategy. It cost a great deal to create a purifying Black Ink battleship, and out on the battlefields, they were generally command ships where the leaders of the human race armies gathered to strategize. Throughout all the battles, as long as the humans were not completely routed, the purifying Black Ink battleships were never destroyed. But today Hu Yu witnessed something new. When the huge amount of purifying light exploded out of the purifying Black Ink battleship, even a pseudo-royal lord like him had great difficulty in confronting it head-on. How is Jiang Qi? He can't be dead, right? Amid such thoughts, the dazzling light gradually faded away, and Jiang Qi's silhouette reappeared. When Hu Yu spotted him, his heart dropped. Jiang Qi was in a terrible state right now as Zhuqiu Yanghua and the other Eighth Order masters were attacking him with such ferocity that black blood was constantly splashing. Hu Yu could sense that Jiang Qi's aura was greatly weakened. He's severely injured. With wounds as grave as this, Jiang Qi would have to return to a Black Ink nest to recuperate for at least 100 years. Hu Yu could not help but feel relieved for his good fortune. Thank goodness they didn't target me. He knew that if they did, he would not have fared any better than Jiang Qi at this moment. Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others were going all out. Two pseudo-royal lords had come to attack them, and one of them was now severely injured by purifying light. It was the perfect opportunity for the humans to double down on the offensive. If they could not kill off this injured pseudo-royal lord quickly enough, they would be out of their depth once the other returned to render aid. With this in mind, Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others did not hold back at all. Paying no mind to defense, they went all out to unleash their most devastating secret techniques and divine abilities, even though it meant that they would be injured in the process too. Jiangqi was battered by the relentless attacks and suddenly found himself in an extremely dangerous situation. Fortunately for him, Wu soon came to his rescue and shouldered the brunt of the attacks. The two pseudo-royal lords came over to kill Zhuqiu Yanghua, and even though they had carelessly suffered in the process, Wu was not about to abandon Jiangqi and flee on his own. The purifying black ink battleship had exploded, so the humans no longer had any means of defending themselves against them. With Wu joining the fight, the pressure that Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others faced increased manifold, and all of the Eighth Order Masters knew that their battle had been lost. They did not manage to kill Jiangqi in time, so they no longer stood a fighting chance. However, this only made them even more determined to fight to the bitter end. Initially, even with their combined strength, they would have only been able to hold their own against a single pseudo-royal lord. Right now, Jiangqi was not in peak condition, and while Wu was relatively unscathed, the fight was still intense between both parties. That being said, both sides knew what the outcome would be. The humans were destined to die. This was just their final desperate show of resistance, with them being too injured to even use those mutually destructive secret techniques again. Martial Peak, Chapter 58-32, Joining the Fight. The battle was intense, and with each passing moment, more lives were lost on both sides. The other Eighth Order Masters saw the predicament that Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others had fallen into, and they were beside themselves with worry, but they were all occupied with their own opponents and could not lend a hand. After just moments of clashing, Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others' frenzied strength was beginning to weaken. For the sake of killing Jiangqi, the Eighth Order Masters had unleashed their most powerful secret techniques. But these methods were similar to Yang Kai's soul-rending thorn in that they not only harmed their enemy, but also themselves. Alas, they failed to kill Jiangqi in time, and were now injured themselves, so it was challenging for them to continue putting up a fight. Even so, the Eighth Order Masters were determined to fight to the end. Jiangqi and Wu seemed to have noticed this as well, and were no longer in a rush. They remained defensive the whole time to prolong the fight as they were waiting for Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others to expend all their strength before dealing the final, crushing blow. This was the safest way for them to proceed with this battle. After many years of clashing against the humans, they had garnered numerous experiences and learned the hard way to never underestimate their enemy, especially when they were desperate. Many a time, the humans who were on the verge of defeat were able to unleash startlingly powerful attacks at the very last breath, just before perishing. If the pseudo-royal lords were not careful, there was a high chance that they could end up with an unexpected failure instead of a complete victory. Such incidents had happened numerous times in the past. Thus, even Jiangqi, who was heavily injured, was able to remain patient and quell his ferocious murderous intent. He did not allow his rage to overpower his reason. Amidst the devastation across the battlefield, an undetectable silhouette was rushing unnoticed towards Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others. Yang Kai, now a Ninth Order Master, was using Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to stealthily infiltrate the battlefield. It was highly unlikely that a true royal lord would be able to sense his approach, let alone these pseudo-royal lords. This innate divine ability was incredibly useful. For instance, inside the Universe Furnace, Yang Kai had used it to snatch the Supreme Grade Open Heaven Pill away from the Chaos Spirit King. However, despite its usefulness, there was still a disadvantage. When Yang Kai was using it, he could not use space principles, for as soon as he did, he could no longer conceal himself. That being said, it was not a bad trade-off as he was immensely powerful now, and could move at great speed even without instantaneous movement. When the purifying black ink battleship exploded, it caused a huge commotion with purifying light lighting up half the battlefield. Yang Kai's attention had naturally been drawn to it right away, so he immediately noticed the situation. Knowing that Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others were in a perilous position, he did not waste a single breath as he rushed to their aid. Yang Kai avoided all the fights between the two armies, and in just over a dozen breaths of time, he arrived at the part of the battlefield where Zhuqiu Yanghua, and the others were clashing with the pseudo-royal lords. At the moment, the Eighth Order Master's strength had greatly diminished. Wuxia knew that now was his chance to strike, so he charged at the humans and threw a punch with his full force, delivering a shock to the humans as their strength declined at once. To make matters worse, as the humans' injuries were piling up and their auras had grown unstable, even the battle formation was beginning to show signs of cracking. The Eighth Order Master's heart sank. There were two reasons why they could put up a fight against the two pseudo-royal lords until now. The first was that Jiang Qi and Wuxia were being cautious in their attacks, but secondly, and more importantly, they were relying on their battle formation. They had formed a six paths formation which allowed them to combine their strengths as one. However, if the battle formation broke, they would no longer be able to pose a threat to the pseudo-royal lords. Jiang Qi was already seething with rage because the humans had managed to severely injure him earlier, so when he saw the situation now, he knew he could not let this chance slip away from him. He stopped acting passively and instead followed up Wuxia's attack with a powerful secret technique of his own that hurled straight towards the humans. Someone of his strength and power would certainly have enough discernment to strike at the most opportune moment. As Black Ink's strength loomed over them, Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others were now in an even more precarious situation. The battle formation that they tried so hard to maintain was on the verge of crumbling apart. They can't hold out any longer. Wuxia noticed what was happening and growled, "Kill!" As soon as he finished speaking, he began charging towards Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others murderously. However, at that very moment, he had a strange feeling. His senses tingled with the warning of danger. An alarm seemed to ring in his head. He then seemed to hear the churning of a river rushing towards him. What's that? Wuxia was confused, but soon really saw a rampaging river appear out of nowhere and crash down on him. He instinctively tried to move away, but all at once, space solidified around him and he could not escape. Once the river washed over him, Wuxia disappeared. Jiang Qi jumped in fright at the abrupt turn of events. He looked over to see what was happening, but all he saw was a massive river cutting through the void. As the currents surged along the great river, he could vaguely see Wuxia's figure struggling within, but once one of the waves came crashing down, the figure disappeared. All at once, Jiang Qi's scalp grew numb, and his hair raised on end as he spotted the figure standing in front of the great river. One look and he knew who this was. Yangkai. It was the Killing Star. The one whose name was known far and wide among both the human race and the Black Ink clan. The one who made the Black Ink clan suffer countless terrible losses over the last few thousand years. Jiang Qi had never met Yangkai in person before. He was one of the many innate territory lords who managed to sneak out of the primordial heaven's source grand restriction. And upon his arrival at the no-return pass, he hibernated in a Black Ink nest to recuperate from his injuries. That went on until a few centuries ago when the war broke out in full between the human race and the Black Ink clan. Under MOU's command, many of the innate territory lords used the source fusion technique to create a large group of pseudo-royal lords to deal with the Ninth Order Masters. Jiang Qi was fortunate enough to survive the process and become a pseudo-royal lord. Thus, he had only heard of Yangkai and how terrifying he was. He was only able to recognize Yangkai because Mo Nayi had once shown Yangkai's face and image to all the Black Ink clansmen before they were sent out. Even now, Jiang Qi could still recall Mo Nayi's instructions. If they were to encounter this person on the battlefield, their first priority should be to flee. However, if they could not flee, they were to do their best to take on Yangkai in groups, and under no circumstances were they to fight him alone as they would not be able to hold their own against him. At the time, Jiang Qi did not think much of it. Based on the information the Black Ink clan received, Yangkai was sealed up inside the universe furnace, and would most likely only be able to leave the next time it opened. Thus, what were his chances of running into this human on the battlefield? All along, Jiang Qi thought that Mo Nayi was panicking over nothing. Nevertheless, Mo Nayi was a true royal lord, so as a pseudo-royal lord himself, he could not make any objections. Despite thinking that there was very little chance of running into the human Killing Star, Jiang Qi did not look down on Yangkai's strength. Multiple pseudo-royal lords died at Yangkai's hands after he became a Ninth Order Master inside the universe furnace. Even a true royal lord had fallen to the Killing Star. None of this information had been kept a secret, so naturally, Jiang Qi heard about everything. However, he never thought that the impossible would happen right in front of him. The Killing Star, who was supposed to be confined to the universe furnace, had appeared on the E5 territory battlefield, and as soon as he showed up, he used some kind of mysterious ability to incapacitate Hu Yu. He has his eyes on me now. Jiang Qi felt chills running down his spine. The cold look in the eyes of his opponent made him feel as if death itself was staring at him. Just as the wheels in Jiang Qi's mind finished spinning, Yang Kai hoisted the spear in his hand and thrust it out. A torrent of spear shadows instantly loomed over Jiang Qi's head. Jiang Qi had been extremely wary of the strange river where Hu Yu had vanished, but he did not expect Yang Kai to forego using it against him. Thus, he was completely unprepared for the attack. He had no way of retaliating against the sudden attack. If he had been at his peak, he might have been able to hold out against Yang Kai for a little while, but he had been gravely injured by the purifying light that burst forth when the purifying black ink battleship exploded. Thus, he was no match at the moment. Black blood splattered everywhere as Jiang Qi gasped in agony. He stumbled backwards from the onslaught of never-ending attacks. No matter how much strength he tried to muster, he could not do anything to block his opponent. A few short breaths later, Jiang Qi froze in place, his eyes wide with terror and bitterness. Yang Kai casually raised his spear with one hand before jabbing it through Jiang Qi's chest. The spear jerked and unleashed a ferocious force that turned the pseudo-royal lord into a cloud of blood mist. It had been less than 10 breaths of time since Yang Kai's sudden appearance, but in that time, he managed to kill a pseudo-royal lord while restraining another. Meanwhile, Wuxia Yanghua and the others had come to terms with their impending deaths, and were about to make one last attempt to gravely injure their opponents. But now, they were simply standing to the side in complete shock. They were all struck with disbelief. How did he show up here? However, they quickly snapped out of it as they filled up with renewed energy. Regardless of why he came, the fact that he was here meant that the Black Ink clan in E5 territory were doomed. After dealing with the two pseudo-royal lords, Yang Kai glanced at Wuxia Yanghua and the others. When he confirmed that there was no threat to their lives despite their depleted strength and serious injuries, he was able to relax and nod lightly to them before his figure vanished. After witnessing Yang Kai summoning the space-time river to confine Hu Yu and slaughtering Jiang Qi right after, masters across the battlefield, be they humans or Black Ink clansmen, were shaken to their core. The sudden eruption of a Ninth-Order master's strength was akin to a brilliant sun that illuminated the darkness of the chaotic battlefield. Furthermore, it was accompanied by the disturbance of the death of a pseudo-royal lord. The human spirit soared. Even though they had no clue which master had come to their aid, they knew for certain that it was a Ninth-Order master. On the other hand, those from the Black Ink clan were petrified and filled with dread. Since that human killed a pseudo-royal lord that quickly, it's probably one of the two old ancestors, right? Though the other Ninth-Order masters were powerful as well, they had only recently reached the Ninth-Order open heaven realm, so it was impossible for them to unleash a force this imposing. The Black Ink clan masters were busy making their guesses when all of a sudden, a pseudo-royal lord's furious yet terrified roar rang out from a corner of the battlefield. Yang Kai? As soon as the pseudo-royal lord managed to get the name out, his aura vanished. No one knew what happened to him. All at once, all from the Black Ink clan fell into a stunned daze. It would not have been as serious of a situation if either Xiao Xiao or Wu Qing had come. Though these two veteran Ninth-Order masters were stronger than the other Ninth-Order humans, the Black Ink clan was still able to deal with them. After all, the pseudo-royal lords had a lot of experience going up against the Ninth-Order masters by now. By forming a Three Fortunes formation with three pseudo-royal lords, they could put up a fight against any Ninth-Order master. However, if it was Yang Kai who came, then things were going to be a lot more difficult for them. Martial Peak. Chapter 5833, A Show of Strength. The roar of shock and bewilderment echoed across the void, startling the Black Ink clan. Yang Kai's fame preceded him, and out of all the Ninth-Order masters, the Black Ink clan was most afraid of him. The one who should have been confined inside the universe furnace right now. Though they had no clue as to how he managed to escape, he did indeed show up here. Following the cry of fury and alarm, the aura of yet another pseudo-royal lord disappeared without a trace. It did not seem as if he had died. Instead, it was as though he was isolated somewhere and his aura became undetectable. Formations. Get into battle formations. A pseudo-royal lord roared. The pseudo-royal lords then swiftly withdrew from the fights they were in to gather among themselves. The Red Flame Army did not have a Ninth Order master among their ranks, so most of the time, the pseudo-royal lords did not team up into formations. Although they could form a Three Fortunes formation, usually, they would only do so if they were under some kind of pressure from the situation they were in. They were under no such threat in E5 territory, so they mostly chose to fight alone. This allowed them to occupy the attention of even more Eighth Order masters, and it also gave them more freedom to move around. However, a real threat had arrived and they were immediately under great pressure. So naturally, they chose to link up their auras and quickly form Three Fortunes formations. This allowed them to feel a little more secure. Nearly 20 pseudo-royal lords had been sent to E5 territory. Their high number explained why the Red Flame Army failed to claim this territory despite being a mighty army with the finest fighters and arms, assisted by numerous powerful divine spirits. Now that most of the pseudo-royal lords had formed battle formations, there were 2 of them remaining who could not form one and were stuck in an awkward predicament. A battle formation could not be formed with just 2 pseudo-royal lords, but there was no other pseudo-royal lord around to form a trio with them. It was as if they had been abandoned by their allies. They felt annoyed and resentful for having been too slow. Nevertheless, they had their wits about them still. Since they could not form a battle formation, they immediately withdrew from the battlefield and moved to the rear. Once the pseudo-royal lords had their battle formations to rely upon, they felt more confident. However, when they looked around and saw what was happening in front of them, their expressions morphed into shock and terror. Yang Kai was cutting across the battlefield without hiding himself at all. He had a long, meandering river around him that was like a massive dragon swimming through the void. Wherever he went, the great river surged and its currents washed over countless Black Ink clansmen, all of whom disappeared as a result. On the other hand, even if some humans were entangled with the captured Black Ink clansmen, they were completely unaffected. No one could stand in Yang Kai's way. Even the territory lords could not defend themselves from the rampaging river. Yang Kai was single-handedly carving out a path through the intense battlefield. What the hell is that thing? All the pseudo-royal lords were thunderstruck by the river that was circling around Yang Kai. They were formidable masters in their own right, but even though they had such power, they did not have the confidence that they could cut through the battlefield this easily. After all, the humans were not pushovers. However, Yang Kai was doing what they could not. He did not stop moving and did not have to do anything else either. He simply relied on that strange river to accomplish this feat. The pseudo-royal lords could not help but recall the information Mo Nayi had provided in the past. When Yang Kai was inside the universe furnace, he used a strange river to kill multiple pseudo-royal lords. It seemed to be a river that was formed by a multitude of Dao strengths. Falling into the river was essentially a death sentence. Yang Kai was rushing about, seemingly charging straight at the pseudo-royal lords, causing them to feel trepidatious. They knew that they could not defend themselves from Yang Kai's attacks, but as pseudo-royal lords, they could not allow themselves to flee at the mere sight of him either. After all, they should be able to put up a fight against him now. After composing themselves, the pseudo-royal lords began communicating with each other, and they soon came up with a strategy. Meanwhile, Yang Kai, who was flying across the battlefield, was feeling a little helpless. Initially, he wanted to use Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to sneak up on the pseudo-royal lords. With the difference in strength between him and a pseudo-royal lord, as well as the help of Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability, he would certainly be able to kill them off one by one. Anyone he had his eyes on would not be able to escape. He did not need to kill too many, just a third of them would do. However, he was forced to expose himself in order to save Wuxia Yanghua and the others. And now that he had summoned the space-time river, there was no way he could hide his presence any longer. That being said, The space-time river proved to be highly effective on this battlefield with massive numbers on both sides. Even though the size of his space-time river could not compare with the infinite river that flowed through the universe furnace world, it was still quite expansive. Wherever the river flowed, Yang Kai could clear the place in a flash, as all from the Black Ink clansmen would be sucked into the river. With so many violent Dao strengths filling the space-time river, most of the Black Ink clansmen died the moment they fell into it. Even the few stronger ones could only barely survive for a few breaths. In just a few moments, Yang Kai had cut across the entire battlefield. He instantly saw 3 pseudo-royal lords in a battle formation charging over to him, while even more of them were trying to come around from the sides. Yang Kai did not care about the pseudo-royal lords who were taking the longer route. Instead, he met the 3 in front of him head-on. Chills ran down the spines of the 3. It took a lot of courage for them to face off against the Killing Star. They were only able to muster up the courage to do so because they were now pseudo-royal lords and had allies of similar strength to back them up. When they saw Yang Kai rushing towards them, they had to force down their urge to run away as they desperately began hurling powerful secret techniques at him. Yang Kai did not attempt to dodge these attacks at all. The dark bolts of light all shot into the space-time river, causing the waves to become even more turbulent as it churned with great ferocity, but Yang Kai remained unscathed. The distance between them continued to shorten, and all of a sudden, Yang Kai lunged forward. He abruptly appeared near the 3 pseudo-royal lords and eyed them coldly as he sneered. "You're quite bold." He made a grabbing motion, and was somehow able to hold the space-time river in his hand. With a quick, forceful flick, the great river seemed to turn into a long whip that closed in around the 3 pseudo-royal lords. They never thought that the space-time river could take on a new form in such a strange way. As they were caught off guard, they could not avoid the river whip. The Dao strength swirled around them and cut into their flesh and souls. Their battle formation, which had been weak in the first place, instantly crumbled apart. An enormous wave crashed down upon the 3 pseudo-royal lords, and they were all sucked into the space-time river. Filled with terror, they immediately tried to resist and drag themselves out of the space-time river, but it was as if the waters had turned into quicksand. No matter how hard they struggled, it did them no good. Waves of Dao strengths continued to crash down on them, and, one by one, their struggling silhouettes disappeared into the depths of the river. After a brief encounter with Yang Kai, all 3 pseudo-royal lords vanished, and there was no way of ascertaining whether or not they were even alive or dead. When the other pseudo-royal lords saw what happened, their hair stood on end, and they were chilled to the bone. After many years of battle experience, the Black Ink clan confirmed that a battle formation of 3 pseudo-royal lords was powerful enough to take on a 9th Order master. All of the current 9th Order masters, be it the new ones or the older, more experienced ones, could not do much against 3 pseudo-royal lords in a battle formation. Even though a trio of pseudo-royal lords would not be able to defeat a 9th Order master either, they were still enough to keep the latter occupied. The pseudo-royal lords were fully aware of Yang Kai's terrifying reputation, and they had also done their best to avoid underestimating him. Thus, when they noticed his presence, they all abandoned their original opponents and formed battle formations before attempting to take him on. They wanted to rely on the strength of all the pseudo-royal lords combined to deal with Yang Kai. They knew Yang Kai had his space secret techniques which allowed him to escape from a losing fight, but they were also willing to accept the possibility of simply driving him off. The pseudo-royal lords never imagined that Yang Kai's formidability in battle and the horror of going up against him would far exceed their estimations. As soon as the 3 pseudo-royal lords crossed paths with him, they were immediately lost to the great river, their fates completely unknown. The pseudo-royal lords began wondering whether they could truly take on such an opponent. Yang Kai did not waste any time. He swiveled around and began charging at another group of 3 pseudo-royal lords who no longer had the guts to face him head-on. They had just seen what happened to their fellow pseudo-royal lords earlier, and were not keen on sharing the same end. Therefore, after a brief moment of hesitation, the 3 pseudo-royal lords split up and started fleeing in 3 different directions. Yang Kai was amused as he roared, "Where are you trying to run?" He dragged the space-time river with one hand and rushed after one of the pseudo-royal lords. When the latter turned around and saw this, he immediately panicked. The 3 pseudo-royal lords had scattered to escape on their own, so he had no idea why he was the unlucky one who was now targeted by the killing star. He could not hesitate for even a single moment, as he quickly used a life-saving secret technique, spitting out a huge mouthful of black blood as his speed dramatically increased. All at once, the pseudo-royal lords' attempt to surround and confine Yang Kai had been negated. They lost all their will to fight after seeing the first group of pseudo-royal lords vanishing into the space-time river. The pseudo-royal lord that Yang Kai had his eye on was not the only one who was trying to flee now. All the other pseudo-royal lords were running off as well. They were afraid that Yang Kai would turn around and hunt them down next. As Yang Kai went after the pseudo-royal lord, he had to focus on using his might to quell the commotion inside the space-time river. Meanwhile, out on the battlefield, without the pseudo-royal lords to aid in combat and lead the battle, the Black Ink clan army was severely weakened. The Eighth Order Masters and the Divine Spirits naturally seized this chance to cut into the enemy lines. Soon, the battle that had been a virtual stalemate for years dramatically tipped in favor of one side. The humans had the upper hand, whereas the Black Ink clan was losing miserably. The leaders of the Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern armies made the most of this opportunity. Orders went out to all 4 armies that made up the Red Flame Army, and they charged onto the battlefield to secure a landslide victory by wiping out the Black Ink clan. In just half a day, the Black Ink clan army had been routed and the scattered handfuls of survivors quickly retreated towards their stronghold. Alas, the humans were not going to let this chance slip away from them. The commanders made the call, and the Red Flame Army hunted down the remaining Black Ink clansmen. They were able to slaughter many along the way, and Black Ink's strength that escaped from the dead corpses seemed to fill nearly half the void. It was an overwhelming victory for the Red Flame Army, and they only stopped the chase once they were half a day's travel away from the Black Ink clan's main base. Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-34 Slaughter. As the battle came to an end, the Red Flame Army at last tasted victory that had long eluded them. Many lives had been sacrificed in the process, but even so, they could not hide their joy. The army commanders gave the order, and everyone began cleaning up the battlefield. Universe fragments were dragged over, and a temporary base was created in the void. The human race army gathered at the spot which was directly opposite the Black Ink clan's main base in the distance. The 2 bases were only half a day's travel apart, so the stronger masters with keener eyesight could even see what was happening inside their enemy's stronghold. They could tell that the Black Ink clan was on high alert. Now and then, the aura of a pseudo-royal lord would flicker and flash. It was as if the Black Ink clan was trying to scare the humans, but that only proved that they were putting up a strong front. Throughout the war, the Red Flame Army reclaimed many great territories, but they faced the most resistance in E5 territory by far. In the previous great territories, the Black Ink clan rarely engaged the humans in large-scale battles. It was almost as if they surrendered without much of a fight. The Red Flame Army had suffered many losses throughout the decade of war in E5 territory, but in the battle today, they managed to deal a crushing blow to the Black Ink clan army and slaughter many of their masters. The humans were thrilled, and they were even more excited because it seemed as if a Ninth Order master was joining them. All along, the Red Flame Army and 5 other armies did not have a Ninth Order master assuming command, leaving them deeply envious of the Azure Sun Army, the Profound Nether Army, and others with Ninth Order masters leading them. The presence or absence of a Ninth Order master made things feel entirely different. Having a Ninth Order master made them feel as if they were children who were well loved and cared for, and not having one made them feel like orphans that no one cared about. Nevertheless, they soon regrouped and prepared themselves for the next battle. On a universe fragment that was just 10,000 kilometers away from the temporary base, Yang Kai sat cross-legged with the space-time river weaving around him. The long river was churning with a violent undercurrent that sent tumultuous waves crashing all over. This could not be helped as the river was currently suppressing 5 pseudo-royal lords. Even with the power that Yang Kai had now, this was his limit. During the battle, he first used the space-time river to restrain Hu Yu before killing Jiang Qi, who was already heavily injured. Then, he used the space-time river to suck up the 3 pseudo-royal lords who charged at him. He already felt the pressure when there were 4 of them inside there. The pseudo-royal lords would not just stand idly by and allow themselves to die inside the space-time river. They kept struggling relentlessly, and Yang Kai had to dedicate a large amount of his strength and focus to keep them suppressed. Witnessing Yang Kai suppress and capture 3 pseudo-royal lords who had been in a battle formation in one go, the rest of the pseudo-royal lords became terrified and began fleeing. In reality, if they had chosen to gang up on Yang Kai at that moment, he would have had to flee from them at once too. Approximately 2/3 of Yang Kai's strength was currently being used to quell the commotion inside the space-time river. Even he could not hold his own against that many formidable opponents. Still, the Black Ink clan had never witnessed such a bizarre method before. They were frightened by the way the 3 pseudo-royal lords disappeared after simply coming face to face with Yang Kai. Thus, knowing how fearsome Yang Kai was, they did not have the guts to stick around anymore, and they immediately ran off. The last pseudo-royal lord that Yang Kai targeted did not manage to escape either. Yang Kai had purposely delayed for a little while before swallowing that pseudo-royal lord up with the river, allowing the others to think they had gotten away on their own as opposed to him not being able to go after them. Therefore, there were 5 pseudo-royal lords sealed up inside the space-time river right now, and around 4/5 of Yang Kai's strength was tied up suppressing them. If that had not been the case, he would have charged straight into the Black Ink clan's stronghold by now rather than letting them delay the inevitable. Silhouettes began moving swiftly from the humans' temporary base towards Yang Kai's position. The 4 army commanders of the Red Flame Army's Eastern, Southern, Western and Northern armies were in the lead, and they were followed by over a dozen powerful divine spirits. When this group came over and saw Yang Kai with the space-time river around him, reverence colored their expressions. "Greetings, sir." Everyone bowed in greeting. Yang Kai smiled and raised his hand. At ease. Zuoqiu Yanghua was pale-faced as he and the other 8th Order Masters had been injured during their earlier fight when Jiangqi and Huyu came to attack them. They would have surely met their doom if Yang Kai had not come to their rescue at the last moment. Now that Yang Kai had summoned the various army and division commanders, Zuoqiu Yanghua did not waste any time recuperating from his injuries, and immediately rushed over with everyone else. In terms of age and generational seniority, Zuoqiu Yanghua was far above Yang Kai. However, in this chaotic world where many geniuses were born, a person's strength determined their authority. Zuoqiu Yang thanked Yang Kai for saving his life before asking, "Why did you call us over, sir?" "To kill the enemy." Yang Kai smiled faintly. Zuoqiu Yanghua immediately turned his eyes to the space-time river. He already guessed as much when he came over and spotted the space-time river still flowing about, and Yang Kai's words confirmed it for him. He was not the only one who figured this out, as it was far too obvious. All of them could see that a struggling figure would occasionally be visible within the space-time river. It was clear that the pseudo-royal lords who were confined inside were not about to go down without a fight. It dawned on the crowd that though the strange river was useful when it came to restraining enemies, it was not strong enough to take the lives of pseudo-royal lords. There was no reason for them to hesitate, so the 8th Order Masters and Divine Spirits immediately formed battle formations and prepared themselves. Once they were all in position, Yang Kai raised his hand, and in the very next breath, a figure stormed back out of the space-time river. It was Huyu, the first one who had been suppressed inside the river. As soon as he appeared, brutal attacks were launched at him from all directions before he could even grasp what was happening. Huyu was terrified and quickly tried to defend himself, but how could he react in time? Even though a pseudo-royal lord was immensely powerful, the combined strength of nearly 108th Order Masters and Divine Spirits was not something he was capable of resisting even at his peak. Thus, in the face of the avalanche of attacks, Huyu exploded into a cloud of blood before he could even cry out in agony. Many of the humans were stunned at this sight. After so many years of battling against the Black Ink clan, it was their first time killing a pseudo-royal lord, and they had done it so easily too. They could not help but feel as if they were dreaming. Then again, even a true 9th Order Master would not necessarily be able to withstand the attacks of that many masters, let alone a pseudo-royal lord. Huyu was dead, But Yang Kai did not stop there. The space-time river rippled once more, and another figure stumbled out. Similarly, he was greeted with a barrage of ferocious attacks from all directions. The Black Ink clan's base camp was situated on a large universe fragment that was covered in black ink nests. Their remaining forces had all gathered together, and their hearts were heavy with dread. The Killing Star was back. In this battle, the Black Ink clan lost 6 pseudo-royal lords and countless other masters. Even though they managed to flee back to their stronghold, the pseudo-royal lords did not feel secure at all. The thought of Yang Kai's earlier display made them extremely fearful. The strange river seemed to contain a mysterious power that they could not deal with. Now that the army had suffered a crushing defeat, the pseudo-royal lords were beside themselves with worry as they did not know what to do next. Previously, the pseudo-royal lords who numbered almost 20 in total had gathered here under Mo Na Ye's orders to decimate the Red Flame army by killing as many human race masters as possible. Everything had been going according to plan. The Black Ink clan had been in control of the battle as they had the strength of a large number of pseudo-royal lords backing them, so they were certain they would achieve their goal in just a few more years. However, everything fell apart thanks to the arrival of a single human. The pseudo-royal lords who fled back to their stronghold held a simple discussion. They quickly decided to send news regarding Yang Kai's arrival back to the no-return pass. In reality, they wanted to immediately retreat, but they dared not leave the area without Mo Na Ye's orders, so they had no choice but to group together and watch out for any possible attacks on them. When Sir Mo Na Ye came back from the universe furnace, he brought back some information regarding Yang Kai, including information about that peculiar river. Sir Mo Na Ye said the river seems to be made out of Yang Kai's Dao strengths. It can be used to attack or defend, and is incredibly effective when used to restrain opponents. So, even though they were captured, they could still be alive. All was quiet and somber when a pseudo-royal lord suddenly spoke up. He had an ox head with 2 horns sticking out. It was as if he did not completely assume human form yet. They've fallen into the hands of the Killing Star. Does being dead or not make a difference? One of the pseudo-royal lords retorted darkly. What I meant is, since they're not dead, should we try to rescue them? The ox-head pseudo-royal lord asked. The pseudo-royal lords all turned towards the ox-head pseudo-royal lord at once. It was as if they were staring at a lunatic. We barely managed to escape from that Killing Star. It's good enough that he didn't chase us down, so how can you even think about trying to pick a fight with him? Do you have a death wish? They were all once innate territory lords who became pseudo-royal lords with the help of the source fusion technique. They had all experienced a narrow brush with death in the process, so they cherished their lives even more than the ordinary Black Ink clansmen. None of them dared to agree with the ox-head pseudo-royal lord's suggestion. The ox-head pseudo-royal lord frowned. Although Yang Kai is strong, if this many of us pseudo-royal lords join hands, I don't think we need to fear him. I studied the situation earlier. Even though that river is strange, it's not impossible to get around it. Yang Kai should be at his limit keeping 5 pseudo-royal lords confined inside the river. Jiangqi was killed, but Hu Yu and the others are still alive. If we don't rescue them, how are we to explain ourselves to Sir Mo Yu and Sir Mo Na Yi if they question us about this? The pseudo-royal lords felt exasperated by what he was saying, but they could not refute him either. Nevertheless, none of them felt willing to go up against the Killing Star. Furthermore, rescuing them is also a way for us to protect ourselves. By rescuing them, we will strengthen our side and stand a better chance if we must fight Yang Kai in the future, the ox-head pseudo-royal lord added. One of the pseudo-royal lords agreed. He has a point. If we don't rescue them, we'll be in a disastrous situation the moment Yang Kai comes after us. Thus, the dozen or so pseudo-royal lords were caught between 2 hard choices. On one hand, they did not dare to mount a rescue attempt. The bizarre tactics that Yang Kai had previously used were far too frightening. On the other hand, if they did not try to rescue the captured pseudo-royal lords, those 5 were surely doomed, and once Yang Kai was freed up again, he would turn his attention back on the rest of them. However, before the pseudo-royal lords could come to an agreement on what to do, the extinguishing of a top master's vitality reverberated across the void. Even though there was quite a distance between the 2 bases, The pseudo-royal lords picked up on the commotion with crystal clarity. That was Wuxia. The ox-head pseudo-royal lord turned in the direction the commotion had come from, and he could not help but sigh. There's no point going over now. Since the humans had started their slaughter, it was already too late. True enough, they began sensing the deaths of even more pseudo-royal lords. Each death caused a huge disturbance, and in short order, the fallout occurred 5 times. This meant that the 5 captured pseudo-royal lords had all been executed. All at once, the surviving pseudo-royal lords could not help but feel grief over the lives that had been lost, as it could have very easily been them who suffered this fate. Marshall Peak. Chapter 58-35 Hit and Run. After sensing the deaths of 5 pseudo-royal lords, the rest of the pseudo-royal lords who had been lucky enough to survive huddled together on the universe fragment where the Black Ink clan's base was. It was hard to describe what they were feeling as questions ran through their minds. Isn't the killing star supposed to be confined inside the universe furnace? Why did he show up here out of the blue? How did he manage to get out? Regardless of how Yang Kai, who was now a 9th Order master, managed to leave the universe furnace, he was bound to be a great threat to the Black Ink clan. Upon showing up at E5 territory, he swung the battle wildly in the humans' favor, and the Black Ink clan army suffered tremendous losses. The deaths of their clansmen filled their hearts with dread. The ox-head pseudo-royal lord squared his chest and said, Yang Kai is back and none of us can challenge him one-on-one. Even if we form battle formations, we might not be able to gain the upper hand when he has that strange river of his. Now that Wuxia and the rest are dead, Yang Kai will surely seek us out. From now on, we must always travel in groups. No one is to move around alone. We cannot let him get even the slightest chance of attacking us. As for what we're going to do next, well, let's wait for Sir Mo Naye's orders. What do you say? All the pseudo-royal lords swiftly nodded in agreement. Grouping up was the only way they could feel a little more secure when they were up against an opponent as strong as Yang Kai and all his peculiar methods. Now that they were all on the same page, the pseudo-royal lords did not dare to venture away from each other. They gathered together and used their divine senses to scan the surrounding area, constantly keeping their guard up against Yang Kai. Back at the humans' temporary base, after killing the 5 pseudo-royal lords who had been captured, Yang Kai flicked the space-time river one last time, and countless dead bodies were thrown out. These were the other Black Ink clansmen who had been pulled into the space-time river earlier. Pseudo-royal lords who were caught inside the space-time river could still use their immense power to defend themselves from the torrent of Dao strengths, but the others who were not as powerful could not do likewise. Even the territory lords who had fallen into the river could only survive for a few moments, while the weaker ones died as soon as they were sucked in. During Yang Kai's dash across the battlefield, over 1 million Black Ink clan soldiers had been swept into the space-time river. The dead bodies that fell out created a mountainous pile that made the 8th Order masters and divine spirits feel their scalps numbing. They sighed in awe. Yang Kai had already been known for his fearsomeness when he was just an 8th Order master. Now that he was a 9th Order master, they were certain that he was the most powerful master among the humans, as they doubted that any other 9th Order master had the ability to decimate as many enemies as he did. Wait here, everyone. I'll be right back, Yang Kai instructed, putting away the space-time river before standing up and taking a step and vanishing. Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others had been waiting to ask Yang Kai what they should do next, but since he had given the word, they could only wait patiently, though they were puzzled as to what Yang Kai was doing. However, they soon found out what Yang Kai was up to. A great chaotic explosion burst forth from the direction of the Black Ink clan's base. Everyone's attention was drawn to it, as they saw flashes of secret techniques shooting in all directions. They even heard the sounds of Yang Kai's laughter, and the pseudo-royal lord's roars of fear and anger. The 8th Order masters and divine spirits were dumbstruck. He went to attack the Black Ink clan's base alone. Just how fearless is he? They could not help but feel nervous on Yang Kai's behalf. Even though Yang Kai had exhibited unparalleled strength in the earlier battle by killing a pseudo-royal lord and capturing 5 others, the Black Ink clan still had over a dozen other pseudo-royal lords. Now that they had all gathered at their stronghold, They would surely be vigilant against any possible attacks. Would Yang Kai really be able to do something by charging over there alone? The pseudo-royal lords were not pushovers after all. The great success of the earlier battle could be largely attributed to the Black Ink clan's lack of defense against Yang Kai. It was their first time dealing with Yang Kai as a Ninth Order master, and they had no experience handling that strange river. However, now that the Black Ink clan masters were on guard against Yang Kai, he might not be able to attack them successfully. Even though the Eighth Order masters and the divine spirits did not think Yang Kai's attempt would be fruitful, they still felt reverence and were motivated by his drive. It was unlikely that any other Ninth Order master would be as bold and courageous as him. Meanwhile, the space-time river was whipping around the universe fragment where the Black Ink clan's base was, causing a huge ruckus. Despite losing 6 pseudo-royal lords, the Black Ink clan still had over a dozen of them who were now gathered in one place, banking on their strength in numbers. Furthermore, they were taking precautions against the possibility of a sneak attack from Yang Kai, so they were highly vigilant. Never would they have thought that even with such stringent defense measures, Yang Kai would still be able to pop up right next to them without them noticing his approach. The pseudo-royal lord's strict security measures had been entirely useless as no one noticed Yang Kai's before he showed himself. The pseudo-royal lords only noticed the killing star's presence when he suddenly showed up behind a pseudo-royal lord and summoned that strange river. Nevertheless, it was too late. The pseudo-royal lord was engulfed by the river, and as the waves crashed down on him, he could only struggle for a brief moment before disappearing into the water. All at once, amid the cries of fury and terror, attacks were launched at Yang Kai from all directions. It had been less than an hour since the Black Ink clan army fled back to their base, but another fight was now breaking out right on their doorstep. However, the fight ended just as abruptly as it started. It had been less than 10 breaths of time in total since Yang Kai launched his sneak attack, but by now, he had already run off with that strange river of his, taking 2 pseudo-royal lords with him who had disappeared into the river. The remaining pseudo-royal lords were shocked and furious as they stared in the direction where Yang Kai had fled, but none of them dared to go after him as they were terrified they would share the same fate as their less fortunate comrades. The ox-head pseudo-royal lord had a look of lingering fear too. He had also been swept into the space-time river, and had nearly failed to struggle back out of it. He had to thank his fellow pseudo-royal lords for attacking Yang Kai so fiercely that the killing star could not focus on keeping him suppressed inside the river, which enabled his escape. Otherwise, Yang Kai would have been able to capture 3 pseudo-royal lords instead of just 2. After experiencing this abrupt sneak attack, all of the pseudo-royal lords were grim-faced. They had all heard many stories about Yang Kai. When Yang Kai was an 8th Order master, his biggest trump card was his space secret technique, allowing him to escape from any opponent he could not defeat. Now that he was a Ninth Order master, it was one thing for him to be able to both fight or flee as he wished, but what was most unnerving was the fact that he could move around so stealthily. Even now, none of the pseudo-royal lords could figure out how Yang Kai evaded their senses. None of them had picked up on the slightest hint of peculiarity before Yang Kai made his move. Not only was he adept at both fighting and fleeing, but he also had an even more mysterious and powerful secret technique that allowed him to conceal his movements. An opponent like him was far too terrifying. Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability was even able to evade the detection of royal lords and chaos spirit kings to a great extent. This divine ability in the hands of Yang Kai only served to make him even more formidable. It would be more surprising if the pseudo-royal lords could detect his presence. All of a sudden, the ox-head pseudo-royal lord said, "Let's withdraw our forces." It was not safe for them to stay any longer. No matter how many precautions they took, all of the pseudo-royal lords could very well die if Yang Kai launched a few more sneak attacks. Under these circumstances, their only choice was to evacuate, and the quicker the better. None of the remaining pseudo-royal lords dared to oppose his suggestion, as all of them quickly nodded in agreement. They had been planning on waiting for Mo Na Ye's orders, but there was no point in waiting now. If they stuck around any longer, there was a high chance that the entire army would be massacred. Back on the other universe fragment, Wuxia Yanghua and the others were staring in shock at Yang Kai. Although he looked disheveled, they still felt nothing but respect for him. Even Yang Kai had a hard time fighting over a dozen pseudo-royal lords head-on. Fortunately, he was a divine dragon and had thick skin and strong flesh which could withstand quite a beating. He managed to endure the brunt of the attacks, though he was somewhat disappointed that one of the 3 pseudo-royal lords who had been drawn into the river managed to escape. Sir, Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others quickly went over to Yang Kai, keeping an eye on the space-time river as it circled around the ladder. Yang Kai nodded, same as before. All were thrilled. He succeeded. Without even a moment of hesitation, they immediately gathered their strength and waited. Just as before, Yang Kai released a pseudo-royal lord from the space-time river, and the latter was greeted by a flurry of fierce attacks. The 2 pseudo-royal lords who had been captured did not even get the chance to fight back as they both died one after the other. The 8th Order Masters and Divine Spirits were ecstatic, including the 6 from earlier. The Black Ink clan lost a total of 8 pseudo-royal lords in E5 territory. Since the humans and the Black Ink clan entered a state of all-out war, the humans had not been able to kill as many pseudo-royal lords as they did today, even when combining the achievements of all 12 armies. It was not because the other 9th Order Masters were weak, it was just that the pseudo-royal lords were formidable opponents too and could still stay alive even when they were up against the 9th Order Masters. Furthermore, the other 9th Order Masters did not have all the mysterious and profound means that Yang Kai had. If Yang Kai had gone off to hunt down pseudo-royal lords by himself, he would not have been able to kill this many of them in such a short span either. However, by relying on the space-time river, he could capture some pseudo-royal lords and bring them back to let everyone work together to finish them off. This made things much easier. Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others still barely believed the situation happening before their eyes. They never thought there would come a time when they could kill off pseudo-royal lords this easily. Yang Kai sensed their eager gazes and knew what they were after. They wanted Yang Kai to make a few more trips to the Black Ink clan's base. Even if he only brought back 2 per trip, they would still be able to slaughter all of the pseudo-royal lords if he made 6 or 7 trips. Yang Kai, however, just chuckled. It's not possible anymore. The Black Ink clan seems to be withdrawing their army. The remaining pseudo-royal lords would have fled by now. Withdrawing their army? Zuoqiu Yanghua and the others were stunned as they stared off into the distance at the Black Ink clan's base. True enough, once they focused, they could see the bustle of activity at the Black Ink clan's base. A large number of Black Ink clansmen were rushing towards the territory gate to retreat to the adjacent Great Territory. It was less of an orderly withdrawal than a rush to escape. How could the humans just let them go though? The 2 armies had been clashing at E5 territory for over a decade and countless humans had died in the process. The bloody feud between them made it impossible for the Red Flame army to simply allow the Black Ink clan to retreat in peace. Moreover, the Black Ink clan army's large-scale retreat was a great chance for the humans to hunt them down and bolster their victory with even more kills. With that thought in mind, the army commanders exchanged glances and instantly picked up on each other's intentions. The army commander of the Southern Army patted Zuoqiu Yanghua's shoulder and gave him a meaningful look. You're injured, senior brother, so you should stay here and tend to your wounds. You can keep Sir Yang company and chat with him for a bit. Leave the enemy to us. Zuoqiu Yanghua got the message and nodded. Good. I'll handle the rear this time. Soon, the orders went down and the human race masters who had only just finished setting up their camps flew off again. This time, the 4 armies rushed straight towards the Black Ink clan's base as yet another battle was about to begin. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.